Chapter 482. Come in and sit down. Rong Haiwa greeted them. You just arrived? Yes. Have you eaten? Rong Haiwa took the gift from Li Siqing. Yes, I just ate in the hotel, Su Qianxi replied. As soon as she was ushered in, she was attracted by the photo on the big cabinet at the door. It was a family photo that had been enlarged. Rong Anna's smile was like a flower, and Rong Haiwa's face had a faint but heartfelt smile of satisfaction. On the far right of them, the expression of the woman seemed a little distant and cold. In this photo, she seemed out of place. That is my wife, Rong Haiwa explained. Doesn't she look a bit like you? Rong Xian, Su Qianxi said. It turns out that the last time she was in Kingstown Hospital, she went to see you. You met her? Yes, when I was in the hospital, I first went to see you that night and I met her in the hallway. She looked a bit cold. She has always been like this. Rong Anna smiled and served them tea. Then Nanny went home for the new year. I don't know how to make tea. I hope you don't mind. This is my daughter, Rong Anna. She is 21 years old this year and should be 1 or 2 years younger than you. She can be considered your sister. Maybe you can become good friends. If she is 21 years old, she is the same age as me. Su Qianxi felt she was old. I am 21 years old, and my birthday is in October. I am not much older than her, right? Rong Haiwa was dazed. Aren't you the daughter of Song Yifan? You should be 22 or 23 years old, right? Rong Xian returned to him 22 years ago. With Su Qianxi's face, he could already tell that she was her daughter. If she was the child of her and Song Yifan, then the child should be at least 22 years old. How could she be 21? How old she is none of your business. A cold voice came in, and the sound of high heels sounded. Do you still want to nibble on young grass at such an old age? The voice was cold and not polite. Vaguely, there was even a bit of contempt. She is the same age as your daughter. Rong Haiwa, you are too crazy. Everyone turned their heads almost at the same time and saw the elegant and gorgeous lady at a glance. Rong Xian was wearing a sapphire blue cashmere coat with a thick ankle-length cheongsam inside. She was wearing high-heeled shoes that were at least 5 centimeters high, looking elegant and noble. Rong Xian, Rong Haiwa shouted. He already had a terrible guess in his heart. Could it be? You can go back. Rong Xian looked at Li Siqing and Su Qianxi. We need to deal with our family affairs. It is not convenient for outsiders to be present, so we will not see you out. Su Qianxi looked at her and couldn't help comparing her with the Rong Xian in Song Yifan's photo. Thinking of what Song Yifan had been through all these years, Su Qianxi felt angry. She stood up and asked, Rong Xian, are you Rong Xian? Rong Xian obviously had no intention of paying attention to her. Her expression was cold. My grandmother asked me to pass a message to you when I see you. When Rong Xian heard that, she turned her head and looked over. There was a trace of emotion on her cold face. She asked, Your grandmother? Chapter 483. That was what Mrs. Song had said to her in tears. That white-haired old man had a hunchback and suffered from mild dementia, but he had never forgotten about Rong Xian. Did the instigator repent? Hearing that, Rong Xian did not seem to be moved at all. Glancing at Su Qianxi coldly, she sneered, Why should I repent? Song Yifan did not want to remarry. What does that have to do with me? Others can live well without me. Why should I be blamed for the destruction of the Song family? Go back and tell Song Yifan that I, Rong Xian, never owed him anything. Although it was an expected attitude, when Su Qianxi heard that, she still felt cold. Not worth it at all. The woman that Song Yifan, Sheng Shiming, and Mrs. Song had been thinking about for more than 20 years was actually this kind of person. Su Qianxi was instantly enraged and cursed. You are such an ungrateful person. If my father and grandmother had not taken you in, do you think you could have survived? Rong Xian's hand shrank slightly. She took a deep breath and turned to the side. Her tone was soft but very cold. She said, You can't say that. I also left a child for them, didn't I? You are the blood of the Song family, aren't you? Rong Xian interrupted her, and looked at her coldly. Go back. I also have family business to deal with. No, she was not. She was not Song Yifun's daughter at all. They had no blood relationship at all. When Su Qianxi was about to refute, she was pulled by Li Xiqing. Let's go. Li Xiqing's eyes were like the stars and the moon, brilliant in the vastness. He had something to say to her. Su Qianxi saw it and stopped talking, turning to leave. However, before they went far, she heard Rong Xian's cold voice. Rong Haiyue, do you want to do this? Rong Xian is lying. She is lying to Rong Haiyue. Su Qianxi squeezed Li Xiqing's hand and was furious. She clearly knows that my father and I are not biological father and daughter, but she did not let me finish and wanted to drive me away. Was she actually Rong Haiyue's daughter? Their current daughter, Rong Anna, actually didn't look much like them. Rong Haiyue and Rong Xian's facial features were delicate and small, while Rong Anna's facial features were clearly a little deeper and more elegant, a bit like an ethnic minority girl. She's lying. Li Xiqing walked out and whispered, whether it's true or not, can't we do a paternity test? I think Rong Haiyue has already guessed it. He will not sit idly by. No, I'm just here to thank you, not to recognize my father. Su Qianxi rubbed the corner of her clothes. If I am not Rong Haiyue's daughter, then what about Papa Song? I don't think that's what you should be worried about, Li Xiqing said ambiguously, looking in the direction of the Rong family. Rong Anna had already run out, and just then, a sports car passed by behind them. Su Qianxi turned her head and saw a tall figure walking down. Su Qianxi's pupils suddenly shrank. Looking at the other half of the body, she vaguely felt a bit dangerous and familiar. The person also seemed to feel Su Qianxi's gaze and turned to look. The moment he saw Su Qianxi, he was slightly surprised, but soon smiled. Hi. Update. The update for the leader and the president will be postponed to tomorrow. Chapter 484. It was him, Bo Xiao. Bo Xiao was no shorter than Li Xiqing and even stronger than Li Xiqing. At this moment, he was wearing a military green mid-length casual suit jacket. He was straight, with a chic brooch on his left chest. His hair was dyed a fashionable brownish yellow, slightly curled. At this moment, he got out of the car with a polite and elegant smile on his face. Long time no see, Mr. Li, Mrs. Li. I didn't expect to see you here. Su Qianxi looked at him. This voice, this image, was impressively a noble gentleman. But faintly, Su Qianxi subconsciously overlapped him with another violent and rude man. For a moment, she was slightly dazed. Rong Anna ran out, panting and looking at the man in front of the car. She went up and said, Xiao, my parents are quarreling again. Let's go in and talk to them. Bo Xiao seemed to be a bit helpless. Oh, I can't help it. I'm too tired. Let's go. Don't fight later. Bo Xiao closed the door and threw his sunglasses in. Soon, he nodded slightly to them and said, Excuse me. After that, he walked into the Rong family with Bo Xiao. Although the pace was fast, it was not too slow. This was the result of years of cultivation. Ordinary people could not pretend to be calm and generous. After Bo Xiao and Rong Anna went in, Li Xiqing slowly asked, What's wrong? Su Qianxi looked in that direction and suddenly came back to herself. Gently shaking her head, she said, No, it must be an illusion. What did you see? I'll tell you when we get back. I am sleepy. Okay. Li Xiqing held her in his arms and quickly walked out of the alley and onto the road. When returning to the hotel, Su Qianxi took off her clothes and lay in bed. After thinking for a long time, she said, Honey, I think. She paused and turned her head, only to find that Li Xiqing had disappeared. Honey? She got out of bed and walked out of the living room barefoot. Today, the sun was a bit bright. The golden sunlight shone through the large floor-to-ceiling windows, and the whole room was warm. Li Xiqing was sitting on the sofa and playing with the laptop he brought. On a large dark background, there were codes that she could not understand. His fingers were jumping quickly, and the sound of typing came from the keyboard. She wanted to scare him from behind. Standing on her tiptoes, she tried not to make a sound as she walked, careful and careful. Suddenly, she rushed forward and put her hands on his shoulders. At the same time, the sound of glass being broken rang at the same time. Bang! The TV in the living room made a dull explosion sound. Su Qianxi was shocked and looked at the TV. Li Xiqing turned his head and saw smoke coming out of the hole in the middle of the crack on the TV screen. Those were bullet holes. Li Xiqing's heart skipped a beat. He pushed her hard and rolled to the side with her in his arms.
Bang!
There was a small hole in the leg of the table, and both sides were transparent. If it hit him, Su Qianxi screamed and trembled. He pulled a stool in front of him, pulled Su Qianxi and growled, "Keep up." Fortunately, they were very close to the door at the moment. Li Xiqing escorted her to the porch and immediately pressed the emergency button. Chapter 485. It was a bright green window that blocked any line of sight from this side. Nothing could be seen. Su Qianxi grabbed his clothes and desperately pulled him out. "Go, go." He turned and held her in his arms, quickly walking out of the corridor. "Don't be afraid, it's okay." The hotel manager quickly came over, saw them like this, and immediately asked, "Call the police."
Ah!
The hotel manager was a bit confused. "Sir, what happened?" "Call the police, can't you hear me?" Li Xiqing growled. Su Qianxi, who was holding him tightly, trembled even more. Li Xiqing's voice became soft. It's okay. Su Qianxi's hands were shaking. She suddenly looked up, looked into his eyes, and whimpered. "She wants to kill me, is it Rong Xian? She wants to kill me? Don't think too much. If she wants to kill you, why wait until now?" He patted her back and whispered, "It's okay. Wait for the police to come and let them investigate." A tall figure slowly walked into a rather romantic coffee shop and sat down in front of a beautiful woman. The beautiful woman seemed to ask casually, "How is it?"
Failed.
That person's reaction was much faster than I thought. "What should we do? If she recognizes us or catches us, we will all die." The tall man chuckled. "Oh, my fiancé, you are doubting my intelligence. Did you change the bullets?" "Of course." The tall man smiled elegantly, his voice very light and low, and even the shape of his lips was very vague. "A big shot is coming back from San Francisco, with great wealth." When Rong Haiwa arrived, Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi had finished their statements and were protected. Su Qianxi was obviously frightened, holding Li Xiqing and not letting go. Seeing Rong Haiwa coming, she looked a bit dazed. "Are you okay?" Rong Haiwa approached slightly and whispered. Li Xiqing gently shook his head, looking at him with a pair of cold eyes, deep and vast, hiding unspeakable kindness and unkindness, extremely complicated. "What about Rong Xian?" Su Qianxi asked. "Where was she in the afternoon?" Rong Haiwa was slightly stunned. "She has been at home since you left, until she called me just now." Then he thought of something. "You suspect her?" "Impossible." Rong Haiwa's face was full of certainty. "Back then, she could leave me, a newborn child, at the door of the orphanage. Now I suddenly appeared and ruined her good deeds for so many years." She looked at Rong Haiwa with some sadness. "Except for her, I can't think of anyone who wants me dead so much." Every shot was aimed at her body. The bullet pierced through the floor-to-ceiling window and the chair. If it had hit her, she would probably be dead by now. No one was not afraid of death, especially someone like Su Qianxi, who had died once. Clearly seeing the fear and distrust in her eyes, Rong Haiwa opened his mouth, but in the end, he did not say a word. The sound of high heels was getting closer. Rong Haiwa turned his head and saw a slender figure in sapphire blue stopping behind them. Chapter 486. "Honey, let's go back to Kingstown." She sniffed. "I regret it. If I had known this would happen, I would not have come to the capital. I was kicked out and almost died." "Yes, let's go back." He stroked her hair and said softly, "Don't be afraid. It will be fine." Suddenly, Li Xiqing's phone rang. It was Luo Zhan. "Hello, Xiqing?" "Yes." It's not that guy. That guy has not returned to China yet, and the people who have conflicts with you are not in the capital. Just in case, I also screened all the call records and did not find any. And didn't you decide to go to the capital temporarily? Only your family knows about it, right? Even if those people have 3 heads and 6 arms, they can't reach that far. In addition to the people you just told me, who else has this motive? Can you think about it? The phone was put between Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi, and she also heard these words clearly. Frowning, she thought hard for a long while before saying a name. Tang Menjing. Tang Menjing is in Kingstown First Hospital. She has not been discharged yet, and she has no communication tools on her. Laurel is taking care of her, and no one else is in contact with her. She can't have a second Rong Rui who is willing to do things for her, right? Luo Zhan said indifferently. Li Xiqing's eyes flashed and looked at Rong Haiyue in front of him. Rong Haiyue could not hear the content of their conversation, but seeing Li Xiqing's eyes, he suddenly felt a little ominous. You check Rong Rui's current location and call records. Report all his itinerary and movements in the past 2 days to me. Okay. Hearing Rong Rui's name, Rong Haiyue's face became a bit dignified. He said, Rong Rui is my nephew. I know, Li Xiqing said quietly. Now I am focusing on the motive of the Rong family. First, Rong Rui is against us. Now almost no one knows that we came to the capital, except you. However, such a thing can happen. You don't believe it if it is an accident, do you, Major General Rome? I have no motive to do this. You know, if I wanted her to die, I would not have saved her in the first place. Rong Haiyue was anxious and looked at Li Xiqing. She is very likely to be my biological daughter. How can I want to hurt her? Su Qianxi heard the words, looked up at him, and then looked behind him. Rong Xian stood, looking at Rong Haiyue with a complicated look. Rong Haiyue, you think too much. This is Song Yifun's daughter. Your daughter's name is Rong Anna. Have you forgotten the name you gave her? She is the same age as Anna. Rong Haiyue looked back at her. And do you really think I don't know? Anna is not related to me by blood at all. I didn't say anything because I'm giving you face, Rong Xian. Ha! Rong Xian's face suddenly changed. She looked at Rong Haiyue coldly. You went for the identification? Chapter 487. Rong Haiyue's voice was a bit loud, and the police outside looked over. Rong Xian immediately closed the door and locked it. For a time, there were only 4 of them in the room, 2 couples. Rong Haiyue looked at Rong Xian as if he was looking at a madwoman. He reached out and grabbed her arm. Staring at her with reddish eyes, he asked word by word. Back then, you were really pregnant and gave birth to the child, but you lost my daughter, right? Rong Xian looked at him with pity and did not speak. Such an attitude undoubtedly confirmed Rong Haiyue's guess. Rong Haiyue was silent for a moment and suddenly chuckled. Then, where did Anna come from? Anna is not your daughter, nor is she my daughter. Then, what about her biological parents?
Dead.
Rong Xian's voice was a bit hoarse, with an imperceptible sob. I found her under the bridge. Her mother was holding her, and her body was still bleeding. She begged me to save her, so I picked her up, but her mother could not be saved and died. Then, Rong Xian chuckled and looked at Rong Haiyue with pity. Her mother told me that Anna was pregnant by a whore. Do you think it's tragic? A bastard, huh? Rong Haiyue's heart felt like it had been hammered. An indescribable pain almost burst out. With a big hand, Rong Haiyue slapped her hard in the face. Rong Xian was hit suddenly, and she was caught off guard. Her feet were crooked, and her whole body fell to the ground. The side of his face that had been slapped instantly swelled up, and it was burning hot. Rong Xian was a bit dazed, covering her face, and looking at Rong Haiyue, who had been taking care of her for more than 20 years. Incredulous. Startled, Su Qianxi let out a cry. Rong Xian looked at the hatred in Rong Haiyue's eyes and suddenly laughed loudly. You hit me? Rong Haiyue, you actually hit me? Ha ha ha. You can't stand it? Do you know that when she was young, I went to buy 2 buns and threw them on the ground. I asked her to pick them up, and she really did it. I really wanted to take a photo to show you that this is your daughter. This is Rong Haiyue's biological daughter. She is not even comparable to a beggar. But you're feeding a bastard from God knows where, treating him like a princess. Before Rong Xian could finish her sentence, she could not utter another syllable. Rong Haiyue grabbed her neck with his big hand. His face was completely red, and his eyes were wet. He did not show any mercy. He wanted to kill her. Li Xiqing was shocked and immediately went to pull him away. However, Rong Haiyue had lost his mind at the moment and was incredibly strong. Rong Xian's face turned purple. She pinched his hand with both of her hands, her legs flailing desperately. No, no. Su Qianxi cried and immediately opened the door, shouting, "Help! Police, police, where are you?" 2 police officers stationed immediately ran over. Seeing the situation inside, the 3 joined forces to pull Rong Haiyue away. And Rong Xian's neck had been strangled with a layer of purple, looking extraordinarily hideous. Rong Haiyue was pulled away. With red eyes and a red face, he shouted and was about to rush to Rong Xian, hysterically saying, "Rong Xian, what do I owe you? You have to do this to me." Rong Xian covered her sore throat, her eyes moist because of the pain. She sneered coldly, her voice hoarse, but indifferent to the bone. She said, "You deserve it." Chapter 488. Rong Xian's attitude not only angered Rong Haiyue more. At this moment, even he wanted to throw this woman into the sea to feed the fish. Su Qianxi stood far away, looking at this sober but indifferent so-called mother. All the illusions and flukes that she had always held were all disillusioned. Why did she do this? Rong Haiyue was such a good man. From their conversation, Su Qianxi could see that he loved his wife and daughter very much. But why could such a woman get his love? Su Qianxi could not understand, but what made her even more incomprehensible was why Rong Xian treated her like this. At that time, she was still a baby in swaddling clothes. She was placed at the door of the orphanage during the National Day holiday. What if no one found her? In that case, was she already dead by now? Rong Xian met her eyes, curled her lips coldly, and climbed up from the ground. After a stumble, she quickly recovered her usual elegance and calmness. Fixing her hair and clothes, Rong Xian took her handbag and walked out the door. Her legs were straight, her steps were calm, and she was as elegant as a lady walking out of a comic book. It was as if the woman who had just spoken hysterically to retaliate against Rong Haiyue was not her at all. A policeman stopped her. You need to go back with us to make a statement. The injury on your neck also needs to be dealt with." Rong Haiyue had been arrested by the police. Looking at her back, he took a deep breath and looked up at the ceiling, not letting his tears fall. Rong Xian pushed the policeman away indifferently and said, "No, deal with that person. It is best to put him in jail for 8 or 10 years and dismiss him. Ha." Rong Xian. Su Qianxi could not bear it and quickly walked up. Li Xiqing was shocked and shouted, "Be careful." Su Qianxi ignored him and walked to Rong Xian, shouting, "You psycho, crazy, ungrateful." He was simply a psychopath. Is Rong Haiyue not good to you? He loves you so much. Why do you treat him like this? Rong Xian looked at her coldly. After a long while, she chuckled and said in a hoarse voice, "You know nothing." After saying that, he reached out his hand to push her away, and with graceful steps, he leisurely walked forward. Su Qianxi felt like she had punched cotton. Instead of venting her anger, she felt even more aggrieved. He was so angry that he stomped his feet, turned around, and immediately ran up to Rong Xian. However, just as he was about to say something, he saw the tears flowing down Rong Xian's cheeks. That pair of eyes that were extremely similar to her own hid deep and obscure emotions, like regret, enlightenment, and pain. As tears flowed down, they were exposed in front of her eyes. However, Rong Xian immediately wiped away her tears and walked even faster. She walked around her in large strides and quickly left. Su Qianxi froze, watching the 2 police officers ready to take Rong Haiyue away. Why? Rong Haiyue did nothing wrong. Rong Anna was playing games at home. The door was opened, and the elegant sound of high heels approached. Rong Anna didn't need to look to know who it was. She didn't raise her head and shouted, "Mom, you're back? Where's Dad?" No one responded. Chapter 489. Rong Xian seemed to be in a bad mood, and Rong Anna could only see her back. Rong Xian went straight into the door, and Rong Anna heard the sound of the door being locked. Inexplicable. For so many years, she always felt that Rong Xian was living in her own world. She refused to communicate with people and refused anyone to enter, including her husband and daughter. Rong Anna didn't care, sat down, and continued to play games. Rong Xian threw herself on the bed. Her neck was still very painful, and with the shaking of her body, there was a burst of tearing feeling. Picking up the mirror at the bedside, the purple mark was shocking. This was done by Rong Haiyue himself. The Rong Haiyue, who always wanted to please her and keep her by his side, did it himself. He really wanted to kill her. Lying on the bed, Rong Xian's heart was terribly empty, as if something was quietly passing away in her heart that had not been filled in for more than 20 years. Looking at the ceiling, Rong Haiyue's face seemed to appear in front of her, with a smile, with humble concern, and came to her with a smile, but she had stepped on him for more than 20 years. After a while, Rong Xian smiled. "You deserve it." She didn't know how many years it had been since she had this dream. In the dream, she was wearing a red bridal dress, sitting shyly on the bed. The matchmaker in the town had been talking to her since the early hours of the morning, teaching her a lot of things. Rong Xian smiled shyly. Thinking of marrying that person, she couldn't stop the sweetness in her heart. Finally, they were going to be together. Although they still couldn't get a marriage certificate, this was not a problem at all, was it? However, a figure suddenly appeared outside the window. Rong Xian thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Only when he spoke did she suddenly wake up. It was him. He had found his way here. What was her reaction at the time? Like falling into an ice cellar, her whole body was cold, and she froze in place. The matchmaker was saying auspicious words outside, and Rong Xian lied to her that she was going to find something and would be back soon. When he found Rong Haiyue, he took her and went to the river bank. He said, "Come back with me, Rong Xian. Mom only has a few days left. Now she just wants to see me get married. Come back with me and fulfill her last wish, okay?" Rong Xian forgot what she had said. She did not know which sentence had angered Rong Haiyue. There was a cement road that had just been repaired, and there was still a large patch of grass that had not been flattened. He pulled her into the bushes. Rong Xian cried and begged him not to. However, every time she called him brother, it triggered the anger in his heart. He entered her mercilessly, and when he realized that she had lost her virginity, he flew into a rage. "Xian." It was Song Yifan. He had come to see her. Rong Haiyue pinched her and gritted his teeth. Louder. "Let him see what you are doing. Let's see if he still wants you." In the end, she did not dare to make a sound, and Rong Haiyue did not move either. The two held their breath until Song Yifan was far away. Then he pressed her down mercilessly and ravaged her. After that, Rong Xian's clothes were ruined. She whimpered and ran around. At that time, Rong Haiyue drove the old car he borrowed, caught her in the town, and forced her into the car. He tied her up in the back seat and drove back to the capital. He locked her in the warehouse. As long as she was obedient, he would be gentle. Chapter 490. She didn't want it, she didn't want it. She cried and said, "You are the brother, and this is called incest." He pressed her down mercilessly, using his body to tell her that it wasn't. She was his child bride, and she was destined to marry him, wasn't she? The huge phone rang, and Rong Xian suddenly woke up from her sleep. She wiped her face, which was already wet. The phone was still ringing. She picked it up, and it was a strange number. It was Kingstown. She picked it up, and neither side spoke. After a few seconds, there was a soft female voice. "You want to accuse him? It was clearly your fault. You angered him, so he would do that to you. You are at the police station?"
Yes.
"Let the police answer the phone." Su Qianxi was silent for a moment, feeling that Rong Xian would hurt him, so she did not move. You called me to ask me to let him go, didn't you? Rong Xian chuckled, and her voice was still hoarse. Domestic violence, the police can't do anything about it. I will not accuse him. Ask them to let him go. Really? Su Qianxi was a bit surprised and handed the phone to a staff member. Sure enough, after he answered the phone, he looked at Su Qianxi strangely. When Rong Haiyue came out, it was already late at night. Su Qianxi was so sleepy that she lay in his arms, half asleep. Suddenly, she saw Rong Haiyue coming out and was a bit surprised. You're out. Rong Haiyue saw her surprised little face, and a pair of sharp eyes were sad.
I'm sorry.
Su Qianxi was dazed, feeling a bit strange about his sudden apology. I hurt you. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have ended up like that. I thought. Rong Haiyue's voice was a little choked, and his eyes were slightly red. I thought that no matter how cruel she was, she wouldn't hurt a child. No matter how much she hated me, she still had maternal love for her child. Later, although I knew that Anna was not my daughter, I didn't tell her. I was afraid that she would be angry and leave. Su Qianxi's eyes were hot, and tears immediately fell. If I had discovered it earlier and asked her earlier, you wouldn't have suffered so much. I'm sorry. Li Xiqing held her and listened to Rong Haiyue's confession. He couldn't help but feel sad for them. Shortly after dawn, Rong Haiyue asked Su Qianxi to go to the hospital for a test, and she agreed. Later, Su Qianxi did not sleep all night. Rong Haiyue sent someone to protect them. After letting Su Qianxi rest, the two of them got on the plane back to Kingstown. After getting off the plane, he received a WeChat message from Rong Haiyue. It was a picture. There was no doubt that the paternity test showed that Su Qianxi and Rong Haiyue were biological father and daughter. Su Qianxi stared at the picture for a long while, feeling very complicated. Should I let Papa Song know? He stroked her hair and whispered, Do you think it's necessary to let him know? Yes, but it's too cruel. Let nature take its course. Father-in-law Song has long known that you are not his biological daughter, and he has long known that you are Rong Xian's daughter. When the two of them meet one day, they will naturally know. Okay. On the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, Yang had not yet come to work, so Li Xiqing took his wife to a taxi. Shortly after getting in the car, he received a call from Yu Yuegue, who sounded hurried. Sir, Miss Tang has gone crazy. -3 o'clock. 3 o'clock to be completed before 9:30. Chapter 491. Sir, Miss Tang is crazy. When they arrived at the Kingstown First Hospital, Tang Menjing had been restrained, sedated, tied, and locked on the bed. Unexpectedly, when Tang Menjing saw them, she was not hysterical or struggling. She just looked at them and laughed like a psycho. The laughter was getting louder and louder. There was a hint of morbid madness and calm mockery. Looking at Li Xiqing, her eyes were already red, and tears were on the verge of falling. Su Qianxi was scared by her laughter. Laurel explained to Li Xiqing, early in the morning, she said she wanted to eat lotus seed and tremella soup and asked me to make it for her. How could I go out? I could only find a place to buy it for her. However, who knew? She ran into the baby incubator, picked up the baby, and smashed him on the ground. Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat and asked, Where is the baby? He has been sent to the emergency room. The initial diagnosis seems to be a broken bone. There is blood all over his body, and he was crying miserably. The baby was born prematurely, and his body was already weak. It is still unknown whether he could be saved. How can there be such a mother? She is worse than an animal. Laurel was furious, wiping her tears as she spoke. She went out to mess around. Poor child, having such a mother, so poor. Tang Menjing heard this and did not react at all. Worse than an animal, this kind of thing. During the time she was lying in the hospital, she had heard this kind of thing too many times. But why? Why did she have to live like this? She was indeed worse than an animal. Tang Menjing stared at Li Xiqing and smiled happily. Su Qianxi's eyes were overflowing with tears. Looking at Tang Menjing's delirious look, she whispered, Pervert. What did the newborn child owe her? Why should the child be involved in the grievances of the previous generation? Rong Xian was that kind of person, making her an orphan. In her words, when she was a child, her life was worse than that of a beggar. Now Tang Menjing was the same kind of person. What could be wrong with a newborn child? Did you call the police? Laurel was dazed, looked at her, and nodded.
Yes.
Look at her. She committed murder. Su Qianxi wiped her tears. I'm going to see the child. Where is he? In the emergency room. Not out yet. Before Laurel finished, he and Su Qianxi had left the ward. Tang Menjing closed her eyes and lay in bed. The child's shoulder bone was comminuted. He was temporarily saved, but because the child's body was too weak, whether or not he could really survive depended on his recovery. Hearing the doctor's words, Su Qianxi was so distressed that her tears fell. The child's facial features were very beautiful. His little hands and feet were curled up, and there were still traces of tears on his face. He had already fallen asleep. She seemed to have nothing to do with Tang Menjing, but she was born by such a woman. Su Qianxi looked at the baby in the box and took Li Xiqing's hand. Li Xiqing also looked at him. His cold eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Su Qianxi opened her mouth, but did not say anything. She put her arms around his waist and sobbed. Chapter 492. Think about it. This is Tang Menjing's child, the child of the Tang family. Li Xiqing's voice was very low, and he reached out and stroked her hair. The ungrateful genes of this family are stronger than you think. Su Qianxi tightened her grip and looked up at him. At the beginning of life, people are naturally kind. I think the environment should be more important than the so-called genetic influence. We should educate him well and make him a child of the Li family. Isn't that enough? You want him to call you Mom? Li Xiqing looked a little reluctant. Gazing at her with a pair of deep eyes, he whispered, When he grows up, he may hate you. He may hate us for driving his biological mother into a dead end. He may hate us for driving the Tang family into a dead end. When he grows up, he may want to find his biological mother. Is that okay? No, Su Qianxi sobbed. I know this feeling best. Don't forget Rong Xian. What was the difference between Rong Xian and Tang Menjing now? In fact, Tang Menjing is even worse than Rong Xian. I hate Rong Xian. When the child grows up, he will definitely feel the same as I do now. Besides, we saved him now, and he will be grateful to us in the future, right? Don't underestimate the ungrateful genes of the Tang family, Mrs. Li. Su Qianxi bowed her head and stopped talking. Tang Menjing was quickly taken away by the police. For a month and a half, the only family that supported and helped her was the Liu family. During this period, she appealed twice and was finally sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempted murder. Since the shooting incident in the capital, Li Xiqing immediately went to Star City to find a female bodyguard to follow Su Qianxi. According to Li Xiqing's idea, he originally wanted to send her too, but Su Qianxi was afraid that it would be too high-profile. In the end, she chose a tall and thin girl with an ordinary appearance. As a pregnant woman for 3 months, Su Qianxi's performance seemed to be no different from ordinary people, except that she was a bit sleepy, a bit picky about what she ate, and occasionally had heartburn. It had been almost a month since school started, and Su Qianxi was in a half-awake state almost every day. After class, the bodyguard Shuang Yu helped her carry her bag and escorted her home. On this day, Su Qianxi was directly taken back to Yuxiu Villa by Yang's driver after school. There were also 2 bodyguards standing at the door. When they saw her return, they bowed slightly to her. Su Qianxi had long been used to this scene and walked in calmly. As soon as she got home, she smelled the hot and sour fish Nanny Rong made for her. Su Qianxi dropped her bag and went into the kitchen, almost drooling. Washing her hands, she sat at the table and asked, "Where is he?" Nanny Rong gave her a bowl of rice and said, "Mr. Jiang hasn't come back yet. I heard that the company has been very busy recently. By the way, I heard that Tang Menjing went crazy and was locked up in a mental hospital. Did Mr. Jiang tell you what happened? Su Qianxi took the rice and shook her head. No. Is Tang Menjing really crazy? I heard from Sir on the phone this morning that she seemed to have bitten off the warden's ear while he was still alive. After she was sent to the mental hospital for a checkup, they found out that she had long gone mad. Coupled with the fact that she was bullied in prison, she is now in a very dangerous situation. Chapter 493. Don't be impatient. Mr. Li is doing this for your own good. You should have listened to Captain Li and not let you go to school. Mr. Li can't argue with you. It's better to send a few more people. If something goes wrong, it will be bad. I know. Su Qianxi had a good appetite. After eating 2 bowls of rice, she went upstairs with her bag. After the shower, Su Qianxi heard the sound of breathing in the room. While drying her hair, she walked toward the bed and called, "Honey." However, there was no response. Su Qianxi did not care. Sitting on the bed and drying her hair, she crossed her legs and picked up the pregnancy book on the bedside, flipping through it. However, the breathing became louder and louder. Su Qianxi looked up and saw no one. Putting the book back, Su Qianxi went into the cloakroom and tentatively called, "Honey." It was dark inside. She turned on the light, but there was no one. Drying her hair and walking out, Su Qianxi looked at the bed again. No one was there. She opened the door and looked out. Li Xiqing had just opened the door and walked in. Seeing her coming out, his cold face softened. Seeing him, Su Qianxi was dazed. At the same time, she heard breathing behind her. Su Qianxi was stiff, and her breathing suddenly became rapid. Her arms were stiff, and she did not even dare to move. Seeing her increasingly strange face, Li Xiqing felt a bit strange. Su Qianxi did not dare to move, sobbing and asking for help. "Honey." Li Xiqing suddenly felt something was wrong. He strode upstairs, taking 3 steps at a time. When he came to Su Qianxi, he found that she was already soaked in cold sweat and stiff. Su Qianxi shivered and whispered, "In the room, there is someone else." Li Xiqing's heart skipped a beat. Hugging her, he called, "Cheng De." The 2 bodyguards at the door heard the noise and immediately ran in. Seeing Li Xiqing upstairs, the 2 rushed up at the same time. When Cheng and De came up, Li Xiqing hugged Su Qianxi and stared inside. The 2 bodyguards immediately understood and went inside to rummage through it. Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi walked in and saw Cheng open the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling windows. They suddenly saw a hideous clown doll stuck to the window. Su Qianxi shuddered and screamed in fear. He patted her shoulder. "It's okay. Don't be afraid." The clown doll was a mini stereo. As soon as the floor-to-ceiling windows opened, she could hear the sudden breathing sound. It was extremely loud. The bodyguard took down the clown, checked it, and gave it to Li Xiqing. At the same time, the bodyguard Ada handed over a sapphire blue book that he had just found on the windowsill. Under the clown speaker was a sticky note with messy handwriting. "I heard your wife is pregnant." The strange sound coming from the speaker, coupled with the strange note, made Li Xiqing's heart skip a beat. His eyes, which had no warmth to begin with, were now stained with a layer of frost and deadly venom, making him shudder. Cheng and De had not been with Li Xiqing for long, and it was the first time they had seen a master like this. The 2 looked at each other and stood aside respectfully. Su Qianxi took the sapphire blue book, which had 4 big words printed on it. Mom's Diary. Opening it, the beautiful handwriting was on the paper. The owner of this book was Tang Menjing. Chapter 494. Isn't Tang Menjing locked up? How could she? Su Qianxi was scared. Grabbing his sleeve, she couldn't help feeling scared. What does she want to do? Don't be afraid. It's not her. Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes and had an idea. That person just wants to scare you. He can't do anything to you now. Who could it be? The Tang family or the Liu family? The Liu family? Mrs. Tang's maiden family? Yes. Li Xiqing nodded. I will take you to the old house first. During this time, let's stay here, okay? Su Qianxi nodded. Li Xiqing winked at the two bodyguards, who immediately understood, closed the door, and left. Su Qianxi packed a few simple clothes, but as she was doing so, she felt something was wrong. The Tang family has now been defeated. Tang Zhenghao is missing. Mrs. Tang is in prison and infected with AIDS. Tang Menjiang has been admitted to a mental hospital. Even Tang Mengqing has been forced by her uncle's family not to contact Li Weiya. The Tang family is now besieged and helpless. As long as the Lu family is a little smart, they will know to stay away from the Tang family. Why do the Lu family still work for Tang Zhenghao? Su Qianxi suddenly remembered the mysterious force that had helped Tang Menjiang in her previous lifetime. Previously, she thought it had something to do with Rong Rui, but now Rong Rui was with Chengyu, and Chengyu had no reason to betray Li Xiqing. So, who was the mysterious force? Su Qianxi frowned and looked at Li Xiqing. Looking at her, Li Xiqing's eyes lit up and explained. Benefits. Mrs. Tang married Tang Zhenghao for profit. The Lu family has been following the orders of the Tang family for many years, also for profit. Although the Tang family has been defeated, it has not affected the Lu family. As long as they can still get benefits, they will not stay away because of the Tang family's defeat. After a pause, Li Xiqing continued. Tang Zhenghao is in San Francisco and has been in contact with the gang. When I sent someone to follow Tang Zhenghao, I accidentally saw them trading. My people were almost killed there. A deal? Su Qianxi suddenly had a bad feeling. Drugs? Looking at her, Li Xiqing nodded and said, yes. So, this time when Tang Zhenghao comes back from San Francisco, he will definitely bring cash or drugs with him. I have sent people to surround that place. As long as he enters the territory, he will be surrounded. At that time, Tang Zhenghao and the Lu family can be uprooted to avoid future troubles. Su Qianxi was shocked. Li Xiqing was decisive and ruthless, leaving no room for negotiation. As long as it was a threat to him, he would never tolerate it. Su Qianxi did not know if this was a good or a bad thing, but she was always worried. Li Xiqing seemed to know what she was thinking. He gently hugged her and whispered, I don't want what happened today to happen a second time. There will not be a next time. I want our child to be born and grow up safely. Be careful. I always feel it will not be so simple. Su Qianxi hugged him back and looked up at him. Chapter 495. It doesn't matter. Even if we can't catch Tang Zhenghao trading goods, the sky-high debt he owes is enough to make him suffer. With such a large amount of money, he will be locked up for at least 10 or 20 years. When he comes out, he will already be an old man. Li Xiqing pressed his forehead against hers and chuckled. Do you think your man is no match for an old man? She gently pushed him and said, Be careful of Tang Menjiang. Be careful of Tang Zhenghao, especially Tang Menjiang. I always feel that she suddenly became crazy. It's a bit weird. Li Xiqing had also considered this question, but at this moment, hearing her say it, he felt a bit amazed. Touching her hair, he sighed. Mrs. Li is getting better and better. Pfft, I've always been very strong. Is that so? How so? Let me see. With that, he reached out to touch her face. Here, or here. His big hand moved down, touching her neck and her chest. She blushed and slapped his hand away. Don't be serious. Pack up and go to the old house. All right, let's go back to the old house to sleep. You're annoying. I'm just sleeping. What are you thinking about? After sending Su Qianxi back to the old house to comfort her, he did not go to rest with her, but called San Francisco. How is it? Already on board. Estimated to arrive at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Flight number is Kong Hang 3556. Before he finished, he heard the polite voice of the stewardess. My phone is off. I will call you when I land. Yes. Hanging up the phone, he called Chengyu. Send all the evidence of Tang Zhenghao's illegal embezzlement and breach of contract to Sheng Ximing. Contact the person in charge of Sheng Feng and inform him of Tang Zhenghao's whereabouts. Yes, boss. Li Xiqing hung up and immediately called Luo Zhan. Keep an eye on Tang Zhenghao's movements at Kingstown Airport and wait for an opportunity to manage and arrange hunting. Okay. Li Xiqing also asked Tang Menjing to be more guarded, just in case. Tang Zhenghao was the only one left in the Tang family. Without Tang Zhenghao, the backbone, the Lu family was nothing to be afraid of. Once he was done with this and settled this matter, the wedding should be put on the agenda. Li Xiqing turned on the computer and looked at the scene that he had designed, curling his lips. He would take her to Ireland and give her the most beautiful wedding of her dreams. It must be unforgettable. Su Qianxi took Tang Menjing's mother's diary and sat on the edge of the bed. The diary recorded Tang Menjing's expectations for the baby in the first 3 months. Between the lines, it was full of maternal love and expectations for the baby. However, after writing for 3 months, he stopped and did not add anything else. Later, she was imprisoned by Li Xiqing, right? Or had she found out that the child was not Li Xiqing's? Su Qianxi felt that she was a bit sad. She flipped the book, and the middle page was automatically opened. It could be seen that it was frequently flipped to this page, which was why there was such an obvious gap, and it automatically flipped to this page. On this page, there was a logo. It was a flame in the shape of a wolf's head, with a star in the center. The lines were clear, and they were drawn with a colorful pen. Chapter 496. Li Xiqing did not return all night. When Su Qianxi slept until midnight, she found that he did not come back. When she called him, his phone showed that it was busy. Looking out the window, the sky was bright, and the wind was a bit strong, making a swishing sound. Su Qianxi rarely got up so early. After washing, she went out of the living room. It was the first time that Li Jinan saw his sister-in-law so early and said hello. Hi, sister-in-law. So early?
Yeah.
Su Qianxi took out her cell phone and dialed his number again. Li Jinan leaned over and asked, Call my brother? Yes, your second brother did not come back last night and no one answered the phone. Maybe he is busy with work. Don't worry, he will not fool around outside. Li Jinan opened a bottle of Coke. Our brothers are very self-disciplined. I am not worried about that. I am worried about something else. The phone could not be reached again, and Su Qianxi panicked even more. She simply called Chengyu. After about a dozen rings, the phone was picked up, but it was a male voice. Su Qianxi was dazed and looked at it. It was 6:00 in the morning, and it was Chengyu. Hello? I am looking for Chengyu. She is sleeping. The male voice was a bit hoarse, and he added, This is Rong Rue. Oh, that's all right. Let her continue to sleep. Okay, I'm hanging up. But then, Su Qianxi thought of something and shouted, Wait. Is there anything else? Rong Rue's voice was a bit sleepy, a bit low. Obviously, he was still in the room. You and Tang Menjing should have no contact, right? In the future, you should not help Tang Menjing or the Tang family, right? After a silence, about 3 or 4 seconds, Rong Rue said, Speaking of it, you're still my cousin. I hurt you before, sorry, but I have completely broken up with that woman. If you need any help, you can find me. Now, I am Chengyu's boyfriend. Shameless, who is your girlfriend? Chengyu's voice came over the phone, a bit muffled, obviously under the quilt. Rong Rue chuckled and said, If there is nothing else, I am hanging up. Goodbye, cousin. With his affirmative answer, she suddenly felt a lot more assured. However, if she could not find Li Xiqing, she would not feel at ease. If he couldn't find Chengyu, what about Luo Zhan? Su Qianxi was just trying her luck to find Luo Zhan. She did not expect Luo Zhan to answer the phone so quickly, and his voice was very clear. Hello, sister-in-law? Luo Zhan, do you know where my husband is? I don't know, but he must be busy at this time. He will be home soon. Don't wait for him. Go to sleep first. Luo Zhan said the sentence as if he was reciting it. At the end, he added, Second brother asked me to tell you not to worry. Just protect yourself and your child. What's the situation? Another familiar voice came into her ears. It was Lu Yihan. Luo Zhan looked up at him, his hands still busy on the keyboard, and said, Not bad. Wanna eat? Okay, I want a sandwich. Thank you, Auntie Lou. Su Qianxi was dazed. When did they live together? Lu Yihan was making breakfast for him. Chapter 497. Holding the phone, Su Qianxi looked at Li Jinan and asked, "Where did he go?" Inexplicably, Su Qianxi's heart was indescribably flustered. Li Jinan saw that she was not right, looked at the phone and said, "Today is Saturday. If you don't have class, go back and sleep for a while. When my brother comes back, I will ask him to see you." "I can't sleep. I always feel that something will happen to him. Uncle, can you take me to him?" Li Jinan heard that and laughed, saying, "Didn't you just call Luo Zhan? Since he has arranged it, then nothing will happen. I still trust my second brother's ability." "I believe it too, but don't think too much. If that guy knows that you are cursing him like this, he will not be happy." It was just spring and the weather was still very cold. Li Jinan was wearing a tight black shirt, drinking a frozen Coke. The expression on his face seemed to be saying that Su Qianxi was thinking too much. Su Qianxi pursed her lips and went into the room with the phone. Seeing that Su Qianxi had left, the expression on Li Jinan's face gradually became serious. He picked up the remote pager that had been hidden in his palm and whispered, "Come back soon. Sister-in-law is very worried about you." Kingstown Airport, a flashy and luxurious yellow Porsche sports car, had been parked near the terminal for several minutes. In it sat a man wrapped in black clothes, wearing sunglasses and a cap. He was looking at the terminal entrance. In the back seat of the Porsche, Li Xiqing transferred the last document with his mobile phone, pressed the headset, and said, "Got it.
Tell her not to worry about me.
I will be back soon." "Isn't it just Tang Zhenghao? Can he grow wings and fly away? Why do you have to keep an eye on him? If I don't get rid of him, I can't rest easy." His intention yesterday was obvious. He wanted to do something to her. "I don't want anything to happen to her. You keep an eye on her. It's best not to let her stay in the room alone. You can ask her to come out of the living room to chat. I'll leave it to you, Jinan." As soon as he said that, he suddenly saw someone running out of the terminal with a bag, followed by several men in black. The person who was being chased was slightly fat, wearing a suit, a hat, sunglasses, and a mask. Just by looking at his figure and attire, who else could it be but Tang Zhenghao? "That's enough. Take care of her," Li Xiqing said, urging the driver in front of him. "Catch up." The yellow Porsche started up, and a loud sound could be heard. Tang Zhenghao immediately looked over and was shocked. He quickly ran, and soon they were out of the highway. A nearby patrolman saw this and immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" One of the men chasing Tang Zhenghao took out his police badge and shouted, "Police, that's a wanted criminal. Arrest him." The man turned back and ran as fast as he could. The wind was strong today, and his hat was blown away, revealing his white hair. He was even more certain that it was Tang Zhenghao. The yellow Porsche sped like the wind and made a huge screeching noise as it drifted in front of the man. Tang Zhenghao immediately braked. Unable to escape, he actually wanted to jump over the fence to escape. A row of people quickly rushed up. One of the criminal police pushed him down and handcuffed him immediately. Seeing this, many people let out a sigh of relief. However, after lifting his hat, mask, and sunglasses, they found that his nose and eyes were not the same as Tang Zhenghao's at all. Camouflage. Li Xiqing felt a burst of anger in his chest. He couldn't help looking at the door of the terminal. There was a slightly chubby figure wrapped up like a dumpling, covering his face, and walking very fast with a bag in his hand. With a cold look, he shouted, "There he is.
Catch up. Dash."
Chapter 498. The yellow Porsche turned in an instant, and the beautiful sound of the engine went straight at the bloated figure. The real Tang Zhenghao's footsteps were even faster, and he immediately started running. Tang Zhenghao immediately rushed to the front, crossed the railing, and entered the road inside. The yellow Porsche stopped, and Li Xiqing immediately got out and ran after him. Although he had not trained with the army for many years, he still had the foundation, and he ran as fast as the criminal police chasing him. Seeing Li Xiqing getting closer and closer, Tang Zhenghao became more and more panicked. Finally, he gritted his teeth. When he was ready to fight with Li Xiqing, a gust of wind passed by, accompanied by the sound of tires rubbing against the ground. "Get in the car." A woman's voice was deliberately suppressed, but Li Xiqing vaguely felt it was a bit familiar. The woman was wearing a black knitted hat, long curly hair, and a large pair of sunglasses covering half of her face. Tang Zhenghao finally let out a sigh of relief, opened the door of the back seat, and sat in the car. Just when the door was about to close, Li Xiqing grabbed the door with his big hand, panting, and reached out to pull Tang Zhenghao out. Tang Zhenghao was scared out of his wits. He grabbed his hand and shouted, "Drive, drive quickly." The car quickly started, and Li Xiqing was dragged by the car, but his hand was still very steady. With the help of the car, Li Xiqing actually wanted to get in the car. "Idiot." The woman in the front seat cursed. Li Xiqing subconsciously looked up and saw a man and a woman sitting in front of him. The driver was a man who looked very tall, wearing a military green cap and a mask, only showing his eyes, staring coldly at Li Xiqing in the rearview mirror. Just a glance, and then Li Xiqing heard the sound of a gun being loaded. Shocked, Li Xiqing immediately let go of the car. The speed was too fast and he lost his balance and was thrown out of the car. "Mr. Li." The driver immediately got out and ran over. Li Xiqing was thrown out and rolled twice on the ground. When he came back to himself, the black car had gone far away. "Are you okay?" Zhou Qin helped Li Xiqing up and asked. Li Xiqing patted the dust on his body and shook his head. "I'm fine. Your face and hands are still fine." If the second wife knew about this, she would be worried sick. Li Xiqing then felt the burning pain on his body. His left cheek, in particular, looked as if it had been burnt. The skin on his palms had been abraded, and his body was riddled with holes. Mud and dust were stuck to his body. But at this moment, he had no time to care about himself. Looking at the black car that had gone far away, he silently wrote down the license plate number, reached for his cell phone in his pocket, and pressed it, only to find that it was out of battery.
"Give me your phone."
Li Xiqing reached out his hand. His palm was scratched and oozing yellow and red sticky liquid, which looked a bit hideous. Zhou Qin quickly took out his phone and entered the license plate number. "Ask Luo Zhan to check this license plate number and all the routes they have taken today. Keep an eye on them. There are not only wanted drug dealers, but also guns." Zhou Chen's expression turned serious. "Yes." Li Xiqing returned to the car and took a deep breath. Seeing himself in a mess, he said, "Let's go back to the company and change before going back. It's too ugly to go back like this." Uffed. Chapter 499. Aren't there more people in the company? They are all at work at this time. Today is Saturday. Hurry up. My wife is waiting for me to go back. Oh, what's the hurry? I'm reversing the car, but you'd better go to the hospital. Look at your face. Li Xiqing looked in the rearview mirror. There was at least a 3-finger-sized scratch on his left cheek, with blood and a piece of skin. Well, it was really ugly. Okay, go to the hospital.
Okay.
He first went to the hospital to deal with the wound, and then went to the company's cloakroom to change clothes. Just when he was changing clothes, he found that there were many scratches on his body. No wonder it was burning everywhere. Oh no, he had thought that he could finally make out with his wife when she was more than 3 months pregnant. Now he did not even dare to take off his clothes. If she saw it, she would be heartbroken. Li Xiqing suddenly felt that he should not have gotten involved in this mess. He did not catch Tang Zhenghao, and now he could not even touch his wife. Alas, however, it was also because of this fight that Li Xiqing was more certain of his original guess. There was a drug gang behind Tang Zhenghao. The 2 people sitting in front and the man driving should be the gangster who held Su Qianxi at the gate of Star City last time, and the woman was undoubtedly the accomplice who rescued him last time. In this way, it seemed that it was more difficult to touch Tang Zhenghao. This drug gang was like an iron wall. The criminal police had besieged them many times, but they had not hurt them. How could he, a businessman, touch them? Unless he also became a part of it? Li Xiqing's movement of changing clothes became slower and slower, and there were more and more thoughts in his mind. It seemed feasible. However, if Grandpa knew it, he would definitely be so angry that he would be hospitalized. But should he just sit around and wait for death? Turning on the phone, he received a call from Luo Zhan as soon as he received a signal. There is no such license plate number. The license plate number is fake. The number you saw must have been tampered with. Luo Zhan's voice was firm. Li Xiqing trusted Luo Zhan's ability very much. If he said it was fake, it must not be real. The drug gang was so cautious. No wonder the police could not catch them after so many raids. Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes and said unconsciously, "Nothing ventured, nothing gained." Hearing Li Xiqing's words, Luo Zhan suddenly felt a sense of crisis.
Hey, what do you want?
Nothing. You didn't sleep well last night, right?
Go to bed.
I will call you when I get the news. Hey, Li Xiqing. Luo Zhan said. Li Xiqing did not wait for him to finish and hung up the phone. Fastening the last cufflink, Li Xiqing put on his coat and quickly left the company. When he arrived at the old house, he saw Su Qianxi looking around at the door from a distance. Seeing his car coming back, Su Qianxi immediately ran out of the house, greeted him, and reached out to knock on the window. He coughed and looked in the rear-view mirror. After making sure the bruises on his face did not look too serious, he opened the door. Zhou Chen chuckled. "Mrs. Li, he lost to someone and was beaten like this. You have to discipline him in the future." *CK off. Li Xiqing slammed the door, and Zhou Chen laughed and went to park the car. Chapter 500. Li Xiqing also had a bruise on his waist. Being hugged by her, he felt a burning pain. However, he did not show it on his face and whispered, "The phone ran out of power and turned off."
What happened to you?
"I fell." "You fell on your face?" Su Qianxi looked at his handsome and flawless face and felt uncomfortable. She reached out and gently touched it. "Does it hurt? Let me put some ointment on it." "I've already gone to the hospital. It doesn't matter. It's just a bruise." Su Qianxi looked at his hand. On his palm, there was almost no place that was unharmed. It was bloody, with skin peeling off, and there were small grooves made by sand. It hurt. Su Qianxi's heart ached. She pulled his sleeve and walked into the room. Li Jinan was sitting on the sofa playing with a car model. Seeing him being pulled in by Su Qianxi, he gloated and sighed. Some people just won't give up until they see the end. Su Qianxi paused, looked at Li Xiqing and said, "Where did you go?" God knew she had been worried all morning. His heart was always in his throat, as though it was being hung up to his throat. She called Luo Zhan, but he did not know anything, and Li Jinan refused to say a word. She originally thought that Li Jinan must not know, but now it was clear that they had colluded to hide it from her. "Nothing. Don't worry. I'm fine." Li Xiqing gently squeezed her palm, his voice low and slow. Su Qianxi looked up at him. After a long while, she squeezed his palm hard. The pain immediately made him gasp.
Ouch.
Su Qianxi pushed him hard, looking angry. Then she turned into the room and slammed the door. Li Xiqing was a bit dumbfounded. Seeing the blood oozing out of his palm again, he felt a little helpless. "You deserve it." Li Jinan did not have the slightest sympathy. He threw the car model away and whispered, "How is it? Go to your room and take the medicine box." Li Jinan couldn't help laughing. He picked up the medicine box and took Li Xiqing to his room. Li Jinan's room was a classic military room. The quilt was neatly folded into tofu cubes, and 2 hunting air guns were hung on the wall, crossed over each other. Further to the side were the national emblem and the national flag, followed by a large army green photo. As soon as Li Xiqing came in, he began to take off his clothes. Li Jinan took a step back and looked at him in horror. "Brother, don't mess around. Sister-in-law is still next door." Li Xiqing glanced at him coldly and threw his jacket at his face.
Close the door.
Then he took off his shirt, revealing the bruises with blood oozing out.
TSK.
Li Jinan furrowed his brows and took out the ointment.
What happened to you?
No wonder you didn't dare to return to sister-in-law's room. Li Xiqing told her the truth. In the end, he also told her about his speculation and decision in the office. Li Jinan pressed his hand hard. Li Xiqing gasped, turned his head, and said in a low voice, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? You actually thought of doing this kind of thing? If Grandpa and Dad know, they will break your legs." Li Xiqing also knew the seriousness of the matter. He turned his head and slowly said, "I just pretended to trade with them. After all, the Li family's influence in Kingstown and the country is not weak. If..." Chapter 501. Li Xiqing was speechless. Indeed, this was not a foolproof plan. However, what should he do to protect his family? Now he could basically confirm that the people who wanted to kill Su Qianxi in the capital last time were the two who were driving today. Even he felt that the female voice was a bit familiar. However, he could not remember who it was. The reason why they wanted to kill Su Qianxi was very likely that Su Qianxi had seen or remembered their true faces. They thought Su Qianxi was a threat, so, however, who could it be? The capital, Kingstown. Li Xiqing immediately thought of someone. He picked up his phone and dialed Rong Haiyue's number. After the phone rang a dozen times, it was picked up. There was a very loud and neat slogan on Rong Haiyue's phone, as well as the sound of soldiers marching. Li Xiqing? Listening to the voice, it seemed that he was a bit surprised. "Yes, Mr. Rong." Rong Haiyue heard this title. His eyes became a bit dim, but he quickly smiled again. "What's the matter? Are you in the capital?" "Yes, watching the training of the new recruits." "Excuse me, where is your daughter now? Isn't she with you?" Rong Haiyue said subconsciously, but quickly reacted. "You mean Anna?" "Yes. She went on a tour with Bo Xiao in the UK these days, and it will be more than a week before she comes back." "Tour?" "Yes, she and Bo Xiao are both music students. They formed a band, which is quite famous. Now they're on a business trip again." "When did they go?" "The afternoon flight the day before yesterday, about 5 or 6 p.m. "Why do you ask?" "Remember the last time we went to the capital? We met in the hotel?" How could he forget? Rong Haiyue's eyes were sharp and he asked, "Do you suspect Anna?" "Still investigating, but this possibility is not ruled out." "Impossible." She did not move. He originally wanted to say that she had no motive, but after all, she was his daughter, and he knew Rong Anna very well. If she knew that Su Qianxi was Rong Haiyue's daughter, she might really be hostile, but this hostility would certainly not constitute killing intent. Rong Haiyue hesitated and said, "She did not know that Su Qianxi was my daughter. I did not tell her." "That's not the only reason," Li Xiqing interrupted him, not planning to explain. "Now I have no evidence, but for Qianxi's safety, I hope you can keep it a secret and not tell your other daughter about my suspicions." "Of course. I'm going to Kingstown next week. We can talk face to face then." "Sure, see you then."
Goodbye.
Hanging up the phone, Li Xiqing subconsciously thought of Bo Xiao, whom he had met at the Rong family's door. They were both tall, but dressed in different styles. Especially last time, Su Qianxi looked at Bo Xiao a little too much, and she was attacked that afternoon. There were many things that couldn't be linked together, but once they were put together, they became very clear. Li Xiqing became more and more suspicious of Rong Anna and Bo Xiao, but where was the evidence? Without evidence, everything was just empty talk. Li Jinan's gaze on Li Xiqing became deeper and deeper. In the end, there was even a hint of viciousness. Chapter 502. Li Xiqing's eyes gradually calmed down. He put on his clothes, opened the door, and went back to his room. As soon as he entered, he saw a small bump on the bed. He went forward and gently lifted the quilt. At a glance, he saw Su Qianxi's small head with messy hair. Su Qianxi opened her eyes, which were red and a bit wet. He reached out and lifted her up, whispering, "What's wrong?" Su Qianxi ignored him, slapped his hand away, turned around, and continued to lie down. He took off his shoes, got in, and pretended to be confused. "Is there a treasure under the quilt, huh?" Suddenly, He climbed onto her body and looked at her face. His tone was pleasantly surprised as he said, "There's really a treasure. What a beautiful treasure." Su Qianxi smiled, but deliberately kept a straight face. She reached out and pushed him away, saying, "Go away. I still want to see the treasure." "I won't go." He deliberately shrank in her direction and reached out to hold her firmly. Su Qianxi twisted her body, turned around, and reached out to untie his clothes. Li Xiqing froze, held her hand, and said, "I haven't taken a shower yet." Su Qianxi did not care. After breaking away from his hand, she untied his coat. He could not win against her, so he simply lay flat and held her in his arms, whispering, "Sleep, okay? I didn't sleep all night."
"Let me see."
Su Qianxi's voice was a bit choked. "How badly are you hurt? Why don't you dare to show me?" Li Xiqing heard that and knew that he could not hide it anymore. He whispered, "It's just a scratch. It's okay. Get up, let me see." He still could not win against her. He could not bear to see her cry, so he had to sit up and take off his clothes. Su Qianxi saw red abrasions on his body, some of which were a little red and swollen, but fortunately, they were not serious. Finally relieved, she reached out and pressed on one of his skin. Li Xiqing frowned and looked at her without resistance. "You deserve it," she said, and then reached out and pressed him down. "Don't take a shower. It's just been applied. Go to sleep." Being seen through, Li Xiqing was no longer afraid. He took her in his arms and kissed her. Su Qianxi was kissed suddenly, but she had long been used to his surprise. Putting her arms around his neck, she responded awkwardly. Li Xiqing was a bit surprised by her response. The kiss deepened, and the tip of his tongue hooked her lips. Gradually, his lips moved down to her chin, her neck, and her collarbone. He was like a devout believer that was prostrating himself in worship of his most loyal faith. Su Qianxi's heart fluttered, and her breathing became more rapid. She reached out and pushed him. There's no injury there." Li Xiqing's lips were against her skin, his voice a bit muffled. "We can continue." "Pervert."
She blushed.
Li Xiqing pushed her blouse up and pressed it against her body, whispering seductively, "I am a pervert who only has feelings for you." She held his neck tighter, trembling so hard that even her toes curled up. "Finally, it's been more than 3 months. I've endured so much."
"Ah, don't bite there."
"It's uncomfortable, coming." Chapter 503. Coming. Li Xiqing had never restrained himself like today, being careful not to hurt her and the baby. However, after all, he had been a vegetarian for many days. When the feeling came, he had no time to care about the pain in his hands and fell on the bed with her. From the beginning to the end, he did not touch her belly. The belly of the 3-month-old fetus was already bulging, bigger than that of a mother with a single child. Li Xiqing looked at the belly and couldn't help but reach out and touch it. "Do you think it's possible that it's a boy and a girl in your belly?" "I don't know." Su Qianxi saw his infatuated expression and smiled. "It will take 4 months to find out, and the doctor will not tell the gender, for fear that you will value boys more than girls." Li Xiqing looked at her belly, left and right, up and down, and couldn't help smiling. Finally, he directly lay down next to her, held her in his arms, and whispered, "I hope it's a boy and a girl. If not, 2 girls will do." "Did boys offend you?" "Boys are hard to take care of. I heard that my mother raised us 3 brothers, and she was furious." The 3 brothers were all mischievous. Among them, Li Xiqing was the most rebellious, followed by Li Jinan. Although Li Beixing looked obedient on the surface, he was actually full of evil tricks, even worse than Li Xiqing and Li Jinan. If his wife raised 2 boys and the 2 boys were like them, it would be terrible. If it's really 2 boys, can you still abort it? Su Qianxi pinched his nose. It's the same whether it's a boy or a girl. When Li Xiqing was about to say something, Su Qianxi pinched his mouth and looked dignified. "Now, sleep?" "Yes, sleep." He had not slept all night, and he had been tense all the time. He was already exhausted. He fell asleep comfortably with his wife in his arms. When he woke up, Su Qianxi was nowhere to be seen. Glancing at the small alarm clock on the bedside table, he realized that he had slept until 8 o'clock in the evening. Li Xiqing patted his head, picked up the phone on the bed, and saw that there were dozens of missed calls. As soon as he picked it up, Cheng Yu's phone was connected. "Boss."
Yeah.
Li Xiqing responded and stretched his waist. However, it pulled at the wound on his body, and the pain made him put his hand back. Tang Menjing ran away. At 3 in the afternoon, she injured a nurse and ran out disguised as one. Hearing that, Li Xiqing's eyes, which were still in a trance, suddenly focused and turned into a beam of sharp and clear light. "Didn't I tell you to strengthen the defense?" "Yes, that's reinforced, but did you catch him?" "He ran away. There's someone waiting for him outside." He went straight into the car. "Shirti?"
Cheng Yu did not dare to speak.
He seemed to have calmed down and asked, "Where is Rongrui?" "Rongrui? Why did she suddenly mention Rongrui?" "It's best if this has nothing to do with him. Otherwise, he would not care about his relationship with Cheng Yu."
Cheng Yu knew how serious it was.
She was shocked and immediately said, "No, Rongrui has already broken up with her. It can't be him." Chapter 504. Cheng Yu suddenly felt uncomfortable. She had worked so hard for 3 years to get this position. She did not know how many corpses she had stepped on. As soon as Rongrui came over, his salary was the same as hers?
No.
This was too unfair.
Cheng Yu coughed.
"This is not in line with the rules, right?" Li Xiqing seemed to see what she was thinking and said, "I'll double your year-end bonus?" "Yes, boss. I will complete the task." "Well, thank you." For the next week, Li Xiqing was very busy. First, it was a cooperation project between the Li Group and Australia. Second, the acquisition of the Tang Group had not been completed. In addition, Tang Zhenghao had not been found and caught, which was undoubtedly a big stone in Li Xiqing's heart. However, it was worth rejoicing that in just 9 days, 2 drug gang transactions were cracked. The value of each case was as high as millions. The combined value of the 2 cases was as high as tens of millions. In the past 2 years, the cooperation between the Li Group and the police had become closer. Weibo and the news had reported it, and the stock of the Li Group continued to rise and appreciate in this short period of time. However, seeing the Li Group becoming more and more famous, Su Qianxi's worry did not decrease but increased. Today was the day of the prenatal checkup. Li Xiqing got up early and went to the study to deal with some affairs. Then, at about 9 o'clock, he got up and went back to the room. He thought it would take a lot of effort to wake Su Qianxi up. Unexpectedly, when he returned to the room, Su Qianxi had already gone into the bathroom to freshen up. Looking for clothes in the closet, when Su Qianxi came out, it was already 2 minutes later. Her belly had begun to show. Su Qianxi's 4-month-old belly looked bigger than the average 4-month-old mother. Li Xiqing looked at the belly and couldn't help smiling. He went forward to hold her, his voice low, mellow, and gentle. "So early today?" Su Qianxi puffed her cheeks and said, "Help me change. It's time for the prenatal checkup." "Well, wear a skirt. This one is loose and looks good." Li Xiqing picked up a spring floral skirt. "Raise your hand." Su Qianxi obediently raised her hand and looked at him with a pair of big almond-shaped eyes, blinking. Obviously, she had something to say. He pretended not to notice and focused on helping her put on her clothes. Finally, he zipped her up and said, "Done." "Hubby." "Yes?" Li Xiqing took the jacket next to him and put it on her, casually responding, "Don't you think the Li Corporation is too high-profile now? It was right to assist the police in fighting criminal gangs, but now that everyone knew that the Li Corporation worked closely with the police, wouldn't it be too eye-catching? The criminal gangs will definitely target us and take revenge on us. As the saying goes, the bird that sticks out gets shot." Recently, the Li Group had been in the limelight so much that she was worried. Chapter 505. Su Qianxi blinked and did not understand what he meant. I have ruined the Tang family, and Tang Zhenghao will never let it go. Besides, even without Tang Zhenghao's participation, the drug gang has already targeted us. His voice paused, and his eyes flashed a few rays of light. Or, they're targeting you. Do you remember the gunshot attack in the capital last time? Su Qianxi's eyes narrowed slightly, looking at Li Xiqing. Unexpectedly calm, she asked, "Are they in the same group?" "Yes," Li Xiqing nodded. "Be careful of Bo Xiao and Rong Anna. I suspect that the man who took you hostage last time was Bo Xiao." Su Qianxi heard that, and there was no surprise on her face. Obviously, she had already thought of this possibility. Li Xiqing reached out and pulled her into his arms, whispering, "You also guessed it?" "Yes, I thought about this possibility. They were afraid that I would recognize them, so when I was in the capital, they wanted to kill me." Li Xiqing's eyes had a few glimmers of appreciation. He nodded and said, "Later, I sent someone to investigate them and even followed them for a period of time, but they were very cautious, always appearing and disappearing mysteriously, and often went in and out of the deep alleys, shaking off our people. Until now, no evidence has been found. The enemy is in the dark, and we are in the light. This gang can fight with the police for so long and still be safe. They are definitely not weak. Instead of waiting for death, it is better to take the initiative to show our attitude. We are a private company. Shaping the image of the Li family is not only good for the reputation of the Li family, but also the higher our image in the minds of the netizens and citizens, the more attention the government will pay. In addition, with the identity of grandpa, dad, and brother, no matter how bold the gang is, they will not dare to attack us easily. On the contrary, they will be very afraid. Li Xiqing was very confident. His eyes were sparkling, and his handsome face was full of the glow of victory. "I see." Su Qianxi was a little dazed, but she roughly understood the meaning. Li Xiqing smiled, reached out and touched her hair, and said, "You don't need to understand. You just need to know that every decision I make will ensure that you and your family will be protected." He was waiting. When Tang Zhenghao couldn't help but make a move, when he couldn't help but expose himself in front of everyone's eyes, then they would take the opportunity to catch him in one fell swoop. Tang Zhenghao, Rong Anna, or Bo Xiao, as long as one of these three people fell into the hands of him or the police, then he would have a breakthrough. At that time, they could be completely solved, and Li Xiqing could really rest assured. Su Qianxi heard Li Xiqing's words and looked up at his face. Noticing that she looked up, Li Xiqing looked down and saw her big round eyes blinking. She asked, "What about you?" Her voice was soft, and he reached out to hold her hand. Curling his lips, he said in a deep voice, "I will be fine, too. I was scared to death when I couldn't find you last time. I thought something had happened to you." Chapter 506. As he spoke, his gaze became obscure and his lips curled into a mischievous smile. He kissed the corner of her lips and said in a low voice, "You can punish me however you want." Su Qianxi blushed and reached out to pat him. "You wish." Li Xiqing caught her hand and teased, "So there's no need for punishment. If there's a next time, I will punish you to sleep on the floor and not on my bed." "That's too cruel." Li Xiqing frowned, looking like he had suffered a lot. "It's that serious?" Su Qianxi smiled, feeling a bit proud. Hugging his neck, she kissed him on the lips and said, "So, you have to be careful in the future. Don't act on your own. Remember to report to me before you act, so that I don't worry about you for nothing." "Yes, ma, em." His voice was low and soft, with a smile on his lips. His eyes were full of love. Su Qianxi's heart was about to melt. Blushing, she looked away and pretended to be calm. "Now go to the hospital for a prenatal checkup." He held her hand and put his other hand around her waist, saying softly, "Yes, ma'am." "Humph, don't think that I will be lenient next time. You wish." At the hospital, after all the tests were done, an old doctor adjusted his glasses and told them that there were 2 placentas and 2 fetal hearts in the uterus of the pregnant woman. In other words, they were fraternal twins. Although he had already known that there were 2 children, hearing the news Li Xiqing was still dazed. In a pair of cold and dark eyes, there was a little surprise and astonishment. His face, which had been calm since he entered the hospital, slowly became full of surprise. Fraternal twins, 2 fetal hearts, 2 placentas? Li Xiqing repeated this sentence, his heart racing. An indescribable emotion suddenly appeared from the deepest part of his body. 2 children? Fraternal twins? Repeating it again, Li Xiqing's eyes were as dark as the night sky, and at this moment, they were even more profound and bright. Did I hear it right? Su Qianxi looked into his eyes, which were even more dazzling at this moment. Curling her lips, she nodded in confirmation. Li Xiqing got the confirmation, and his eyes became even more misty. He suddenly laughed, reached out, and pulled her into his arms. His arms tightened as he hugged her. He deliberately lowered his voice and said, "Amazing! My wife is amazing." Su Qianxi reached out and touched his trembling hand, chuckling. Facing the teasing eyes of the doctors, she whispered with a blush, "So many people are watching. Be normal." "Yes," he responded loudly, unable to contain his joy. He let go of her and kissed her on the cheek. The smile on his face seemed to be trying hard to be contained, but it unconsciously became wider and wider. His uncontrollable laughter was low and moving. It was the first time that Su Qianxi had seen Li Xiqing like this. He could not hide his joy, and he could not control his emotions. He was really like a fool. She couldn't help pursing her lips and looking at him with a blush. Li Xiqing's eyes were shining. He looked down at her lower abdomen, gently stroking it with his big palm. She did not know whether he was talking to her or whispering to her stomach, "Wait for me." Then he strode out of the clinic. "Where are you going?" "To make a call. Dash." Chapter 507. The phone rang a dozen times, but no one answered. Just when it was about to hang up automatically, the phone vibrated slightly. There was a rustling sound and heavy breathing. Oming's voice came quickly. "Li Xiqing?" His voice seemed to be in a trance and drunk. Li Xiqing frowned, swallowed the good news that was about to come out of his mouth, and asked, "What are you doing?" "Li Xiqing, Li Xiqing." Oming's voice was heavy and vaguely. There was a bit of a crying tone. "Li Xiqing, He did not say it, but actually whimpered. Li Xiqing was shocked. His soft face suddenly tightened, and his cold temperament was revealed in an instant. He calmly said, "Where are you?" The first sentence was not to ask what happened, not to ask what was wrong, but to ask where he was. Oming's throat was even more choked, but he could not speak. However, the sad voice belonged to a man, which was particularly shocking. Li Xiqing's face tightened, and he walked in without saying a word. Shuangyu, who was tall and straight, stood next to Su Qianxi. Seeing Li Xiqing coming over, she nodded to him. The doctor was telling Su Qianxi some things to pay attention to. Su Qianxi's face was full of the glory of maternal love, listening patiently. Oming's voice gradually became smaller, and he said, "I am in the villa on Xishan." The villa on Xishan, where Oming kept Yulili. Li Xiqing's eyes were covered with a layer of haze. Oming's appearance must have something to do with Yulili. But to be able to force Oming like this, Yulili's ability was much greater than he thought. Li Xiqing did not ask much and said, "I will be there soon." Then he hung up the phone. Su Qianxi looked over and found that Li Xiqing's mood suddenly became a lot worse. She was shocked, and the doctor happened to be at the end of the story. After a few words, Su Qianxi agreed and went forward to hold Li Xiqing's hand. She whispered, "What's wrong?" "Something happened to Oming. I have to go and see." Li Xiqing's voice was very soft, but his mood was definitely not relaxed. "I will send you back first." "No, you go ahead. Shuangyu and Ado are there." Shuangyu always followed Su Qianxi and did not move half a step away. "I'll take you back first," Li Xiqing insisted. After sending her to the car, he asked her to drive back to the old house. Along the way, Li Xiqing was a little absent-minded. She reached out and touched his hand, whispering, "What's wrong with Oming?" Li Xiqing shook his head. "I don't know, but I've never seen him like that." "What did it look like?" Su Qianxi was very curious, but seeing Li Xiqing's pursed lips, she did not ask more. When they arrived at the old house, Shuangyu and Su Qianxi got out of the car together. Just as he was about to follow, Su Qianxi pushed him in. "You go find Oming. I'm already home. You don't have to send me." For Li Xiqing, Oming and Luo Zhan were the closest people to him besides his family, especially Oming. Although they were not brothers, they were more like brothers. For someone as powerful as Oming to make Li Xiqing so worried, it must not be a small matter. Li Xiqing was pushed back, nodded, and looked at Shuangyu. "Take care of her." Chapter 508. In the luxuriously decorated European-style room, the complicated classical curtains blocked all the light. The light in the room was dim, and there were bottles of wine lying on the floor beside the man in a disorderly manner. On the big bed in the middle of the room, a large amount of blood was shocking. The whole room was filled with the smell of alcohol and blood, which was disgusting. Oming leaned against the edge of the bed, still holding a bottle of red wine in his hand. His thin beige shirt was stained with blood. His eyes were hazy from drunkenness, and he could clearly see the tall and straight figure in front of him. "You are here?" Oming chuckled, but tears rolled down in an instant. "Lao huh?" Li Xiqing could never have imagined that he would see such a scene. Bloody, hideous, and embarrassed. At that moment, Oming didn't have any of his usual high spirits. This was clearly a toad in dire straits. His first reaction was to check Oming. "Are you hurt?" Li Xiqing pulled his clothes and found that his muscles were very smooth. There was no trace of blood at all. Oming pushed him away and said, "It's not me, it's you. This blood is from you." Li Xiqing was shocked, but his heart was instantly relieved. A pair of dark eyes looked at him, unspeakably cold, and asked word by word, "She is dead? You killed her?" With so much blood, even if she was not dead, she had lost half of her life. However, how could Oming bear it? He liked you, Lily, so much. Oming's eyelids were half open, and he took a long breath and smiled. "That blood is my child. My child is gone, and I lost it." "What do you mean?" Li Xiqing looked at him, took his bottle away, and threw it aside. "That woman is pregnant? Now, she has a miscarriage? She wanted to break up with me. She took all the money. All the money she took from me all these years. She actually recorded it all. She threw the account book to me and said that she would pay me back what she owed me." Puffed. Oming closed his eyes heavily, and tears streamed down his cheeks. "Then you hit her?" "Ha, hit her? How can I bear to?" Oming reached out to touch the wine bottle, his hands shaking terribly. Li Xiqing quickly grabbed his hand and looked at him coldly. "Then why is there so much blood? There's so much blood. Can the child survive?" Oming's hands trembled even more. Looking at Li Xiqing, he held his head and shook his head hard. "I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had known, I would not have treated her like that. I didn't mean it, but you put her on the bed? Was that why there was so much blood on the bed?" Oming didn't say anything. He just stared at him. Such an attitude was tantamount to tacit approval. "You." Li Xiqing suddenly found that he did not know what to say. He wanted to scold him, but seeing him like this, he could not say anything. Where are they now? Chapter 509. I've told you long ago that this woman is an ungrateful wretch. How many times have I advised you not to provoke her? You. Li Xiqing looked away irritably. Where is she now? Hospital. She doesn't want to see me. She hates me. What should I do? She wanted to break up with me. After this incident, I can no longer keep her, Xiqing. Li Xiqing was silent for a moment before saying, "Now, change your clothes and go to the hospital to accompany her. She doesn't want to see me. You have to look even if you don't want to. You are the father of the child. You have the right to take care of her. It's her business that she hates you, but you have to do your duty." Oming, Get up. Li Xiqing roughly lifted him up. He was a man of about 6 feet tall. Seeing the large bloodstain on the bed, Oming looked away and then went to the cloakroom to get his clothes. Xiqing was right. It was her business that she hated him, but he must do his duty. Oming wiped his face with a wet tissue, looked at himself in the mirror, and suddenly grinned. Every time, when he was helpless, Xiqing could always say something inexplicably encouraging. How could Oming have such a good friend and brother? No matter what happened in the future, he would recognize this brother for a lifetime. Oming thought silently while unbuttoning his shirt. However, just before he finished, he heard Li Xiqing's cell phone ring. Li Xiqing picked up the phone and saw it was Li Jinan. There was heavy breathing over the phone, and Li Jinan's voice was a little anxious. At the same time, there was the sound of a sports car engine starting. Brother, sister-in-law has been kidnapped. Come back. Li Xiqing's heart skipped a beat. Shocked, he immediately rushed out of the door and ran out. Oming was startled by his sudden movement. Where are you going? There was no response. Su Qianxi watched the Bugatti leave and then went inside with Shuangyu. However, suddenly, Shuangyu's eyes narrowed. She looked alert and directly punched in the direction of Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi was shocked and exclaimed. Then she heard a muffled sound behind her. A short man was punched down by Shuangyu, and Su Qianxi looked over in shock. Shuangyu subdued the short man, but when she looked up, her face changed, and she roared. The 2 bodyguards guarding the door heard the commotion and immediately came to help. Su Qianxi was shocked and was about to look back, but then her hand was suddenly caught. A strong arm wrapped around her neck, and a cold touch was pressed against her neck. Come here, and I'll kill her. The voice was cold and harsh. It sounded rough and familiar. Tang Zhenghao. Su Qianxi stiffened her neck and did not dare to move. However, her body could not stop trembling, her breathing was rapid, and her heart was racing. Shuangyu and the 2 bodyguards immediately stopped their movements and looked at the 5 men walking forward behind Tang Zhenghao. Each of them was holding a long steel pipe, and their faces changed dramatically. At this time, Su Qianxi calmed down and said, Don't be impulsive. If anything happens to me, he will not let you go. Tang Zhenghao grinned and ignored her. Looking at the bodyguards, he said, Such obedient dogs. Tell Li Xiqing to come to the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs alone. If there are too many people, there will be consequences. Chapter 510. Shuangyu was so anxious that she almost cried. She immediately ran toward the door of the Li family, banging on the door and ringing the doorbell. Li Jinan was just about to go out, shaking the car key in his hand. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Shuangyu's appearance and raised an eyebrow. What's wrong? Shuangyu could not say a word. She hurriedly gestured and pointed to the direction of Tang Zhenghao's car. Li Jinan looked at her gesticulating and thought it was fun. He crossed his arms and laughed with great interest, even though he didn't understand a word of what she was saying. Shuangyu was so anxious that she stamped her feet and made a phone gesture to him. Li Jinan handed the phone to her, and Shuangyu's fingers quickly typed, My wife was kidnapped. Li Jinan was shocked, and his face suddenly changed. Then Shuangyu typed, Let Mr. Li go to the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs alone, or he will bear the consequences. Bastard. Li Jinan immediately snatched the phone back and rushed out to drive. Shuangyu also followed, pointing to herself to indicate that she could help. Li Jinan opened the door of the passenger seat. After she got in the car, the yellow Porsche suddenly rushed forward and rushed in the direction that Shuangyu pointed. Su Qianxi was taken into the car. Feeling the knife on her neck, her heart was beating so fast that it almost jumped out. But despite the fear in her heart, Su Qianxi was unexpectedly calm. Tang Zhenghao finally let go. Su Qianxi looked at Tang Zhenghao sitting on the side, shrinking to the corner, hands twisted together, and asked calmly, What do you want to do? Tang Zhenghao glanced at her and sneered. Don't worry, I will not punish you. I will give you to Tang Menjing later and let her play with you. Happy? Su Qianxi's heart skipped a beat, and her back was against the door. Thinking of Tang Menjing's hysterical and crazy posture in the hospital, she couldn't help but feel scared. That woman's mind had long been abnormal. Even her own child could fall like that. After being sentenced to imprisonment, she was transferred to a mental hospital. Now, what would she do with her? Su Qianxi's heart was shocked and unconsciously trembled. Tang Zhenghao looked at her. She was obviously scared to death, but she pretended to be calm and acted as if nothing had happened. He only wanted to laugh in his heart. The car drove steadily in the direction of the eastern suburbs, but suddenly, Tang Zhenghao saw a yellow Porsche speeding up behind them, and the person sitting in the driver's seat was the third child of the Li family, Li Jinan. Tisk, TSK, TSK. The children of the Li family are all good, but why are they so impulsive? Tang Zhenghao looked regretful. I've already said that only Li Xiqing is allowed to come. What is Li Jinan doing here? Tell me, aren't they forcing me to kill the hostages?
Huh.
As Tang Zhenghao spoke, he waved the sharp dagger in his hand in front of Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi shivered and leaned against the door. Her heart was beating so fast that she could not feel it. Biting her lower lip, Su Qianxi's eyes were slightly red, but she clung to the door and did not dare to move. Ha 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 ha. Tang Zhenghao laughed happily, took back the dagger, and said, I'm just scaring you. I still need Li Xiqing to do things for me. If I kill you, won't that guy kill me? Chapter 511. Yes. The man responded, then turned the car and ran a green light. The pedestrians on the side of the road were scared and fled. The traffic policeman whistled hard, furious. Li Jinan was about to follow, but the traffic policeman suddenly rushed up, waved at him, and whistled a warning. Turning the steering wheel, Li Jinan slammed on the brake. The car in front of him had already driven far away. Tang Zhenghao turned around and even waved at him with a smug smile. F***ck. Li Jinan slammed the steering wheel, almost going crazy. Ignoring the traffic policeman's beating on the window, Li Jinan picked up the phone and called Li Xiqing. Brother, sister-in-law has been kidnapped. Come back. After telling the location and the request, Li Jinan was asked to get out of the car by the traffic policeman. Li Xiqing went downstairs, ignoring Oming's yelling. After driving Dai out of the car, he drove the car to the highest speed and went straight to the abandoned warehouse in the eastern suburbs. When he arrived, it was already half dark. And just at the door of the warehouse, a man was standing, smoking a cigarette. Seeing Li Xiqing's car coming, he whistled. It's really Li Xiqing. Even the car he drives is different. Where is she? What's the hurry? Isn't she inside? Don't worry, your wife and children are still fine. Come on, be a good boy and come in with me. The man waved at Li Xiqing, whistled, and stepped back with a playful look. It looked like he was flirting with a little puppy. Li Xiqing clenched his fists, and his face, which was already cold and indifferent, became even more tense. Walking in, the man laughed and said, Good dog, come on, I'll give you a meat bone. As he spoke, he actually threw a lunchbox over. A pig bone rolled out with rice grains on it. Li Xiqing's cold eyes glanced at him. The man suddenly felt a chill, but he looked even more arrogant. What the F***ck are you staring at? What about her? Li Xiqing repeated. His voice was so cold that it sounded like ice was falling off. Oh my, such a bad temper. If I didn't know better, I would think I was in your office. Tang Zhenghao's voice came out, looking slightly fat. Looking at Li Xiqing, he sneered. What? Are you used to being a big boss? Can't stand being treated like a puppy all of a sudden? Just behind Tang Zhenghao, Tang Menjing also walked out. She was wearing a tight black leather outfit, and her hair was permed into sexy big wavy curls. Her face was exquisitely made up, which made her already beautiful and coquettish facial features even more exquisite and moving. Especially her lips, which were bright red and dazzling. Brother Xiqing, you're finally here. I've missed you so much. Tang Menjing smiled. Although she said so, There was no longer any infatuation on her face. All that was left was indifference. "You are here for me, aren't you?" Li Xiqing looked at her, did not speak, and narrowed his eyes. In that pair of eyes that were as deep as an ancient well, the dangerous and threatening atmosphere was overflowing. Obviously, he was angry. Tang Menjing smiled and clapped her hands. Just inside the room, there came the sound of stumbling footsteps. Chapter 5:12. What do you want to do? Li Xiqing's voice was unexpectedly calm. Looking at them indifferently, Li Xiqing clenched his fists. However, as soon as he said that, he heard a strong sound behind him. Li Xiqing was instantly alerted and dodged sideways. The next moment, he had already grabbed the hand of the attacker and twisted it. The attacker screamed and then took the steel pipe away. Clap, clap, clap. Tang Zhenghao clapped and said with a smile, "Nice move." Tang Menjing suddenly turned around and picked up a steel pipe. Patting it in her palm, she chuckled and pointed it at Su Qianxi's belly. Li Xiqing was scared and roared, "Don't you dare!" Swoosh. Another sound came from behind him. This time, Li Xiqing did not have time to dodge. His hand holding the steel pipe was hit hard. Feeling the pain, Li Xiqing's hand moved out of inertia, and the steel pipe fell to the ground. Ah! No! Su Qianxi's heart trembled fiercely. Seeing his hand instantly red and swollen and blue, she burst into tears and screamed. Li Xiqing subconsciously wanted to fight back, but he heard Tang Menjing's gentle voice. "Brother Xiqing, don't blame me for not giving you a chance. As long as you avoid it, or you fight back, I will take the blame on her." Then, she laughed, as sweet as a bell, but at this moment, it was the most vicious voice. She said, "Say, if I hit with this stick." Then, she pointed the steel pipe at Su Qianxi's belly, smiling. Su Qianxi looked at the steel pipe and closed her legs, shaking terribly. "Don't you dare." Li Xiqing's face turned red, and he roared. Tang Menjing raised an eyebrow. "I even dare to kill my own son, let alone someone else's son. What a pity. I heard that they are twins. Both of them are very healthy. If this stick were to hit them..." Ah! Li Xiqing's leg was hit hard, and the pain suddenly spread all over his body. He screamed unconsciously and knelt on the ground. "Go, go." She burst into tears. "Li Xiqing." The voice was sharp and desperate. Hearing it, Li Xiqing's heart suddenly trembled and ached. "Don't cry. I'm fine, ugh." Before he could finish his words, his back was struck once more. Ah! She struggled hard, but the person behind her was so strong that no matter how hard she struggled, he would not let her go. Seeing more and more blood on his body, she was overwhelmed with despair and fear. "Don't hit him, don't." The perpetrator laughed coldly and swung the steel pipe down with great force, ruthlessly swinging it at his legs, followed by his hands, back, and waist. Not a single part of his body was spared. Li Xiqing bore it silently and looked in her direction. All that was left in his ears was the whooshing sound of the steel pipes cutting through the air, the muffled sound of them landing on his body, and the occasional sound of bones being broken. Her voice was getting farther and farther away, and her figure was becoming more and more blurred. Li Xiqing. Her voice seemed to reach his ears. Li Xiqing struggled to raise his hand, trying to smile, but a gust of air rushed up from somewhere in his body and went straight to his throat. Li Xiqing could not help coughing violently and vomited a mouthful of sticky blood. Chapter 5:13. When he came out of the forum, it was already dark. Rong Haiwa looked at the time. It was already past 7 in the evening. He had an appointment with Li Xiqing for dinner at 8, and there were still 5 minutes left. Rong Xian followed behind Rong Haiwa and called, "Rong Haiwa." "Yes?" Rong Haiwa responded quietly. His attitude toward her was very different from before. In the past month, Rong Xian and he had only met a few times at home. When they saw each other, they were not even in the mood to greet each other, let alone quarrel. To be honest, Rong Haiwa thought that she would definitely ask for a divorce. However, unexpectedly, she did not. When he left home this morning, he did not know what was wrong with Rong Xian. She actually asked to come to Kingstown with him. Rong Haiwa was surprised, but he did not refuse. He asked someone to book an extra ticket, and the two got on the plane to Kingstown together. When they arrived in Kingstown, it was already noon. They had been attending the forum until now. Now, she was probably here to complain. Rong Haiwa's heart was cold, but he did not speak first. A pair of sharp eagle eyes looked at her, raised his eyebrows, and waited for her to speak first. You have an appointment with Li Xiqing? Yes. This time you came to Kingstown to meet them? Of course. She was referring to Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi. Rong Haiwa put his hand in his coat pocket and nodded without hesitation.
Yes.
Take me with you. Rong Xian looked at him. I want to see her. You need to ask Su Qianxi about this. I will call them. Rong Haiwa's cell phone was already ready. At this time, he directly clicked on the screen and dialed the number. However, Su Qianxi's cell phone could not be reached, and Li Xiqing's cell phone was also not picked up. Suddenly, Rong Haiwa seemed to see a familiar shadow. It was a slender figure, wearing a pink cap, with long curly hair, wearing a loose long coat and a pair of black high heels. She lowered her head and wore a mask as she went into the darkness. That was Anna? However, shouldn't she be in London at this time? Why was he in Kingstown? Rong Haiwa followed her in confusion. From a distance, he saw Rong Anna walking on the road quickly. He picked up the phone and dialed her number. The slender figure was a little far away from him. Rong Haiwa did not hear the ringtone, but the ringtone sounded. The girl in front of him also picked up the phone. Hello, Dad? Anna, where are you? Rong Anna was obviously a little surprised and said, I'm in London on tour with Xiao. I'll be back in a few days.
Oh, I see.
Well, what's the matter, Dad? The cute voice seemed to be no different from the usual Rong Anna. Rong Haiwa looked at the figure in front of him, was silent for a moment and said, It's okay. Come back early. Without you at home, I don't even have someone to talk to. Rong Xian heard Rong Haiwa's words and tightened her grip on her bag. Rong Haiwa did not notice it. He only heard Rong Anna giggling and said, Soon. Don't miss me too much, Mua. Okay, bye. Chapter 5:14. There was no doubt that this person was Rong Anna. Rong Haiwa looked at the figure, and a bit of disappointment flashed in his sharp eagle eyes. At the same time, Rong Haiwa couldn't help but think of what Li Xiqing had said some time ago. Rong Anna and Bo Xiao were likely to be the people who attacked Su Qianxi that day. Because they were afraid that Su Qianxi would recognize them, they chose to kill her in the capital? Now, were they coming to retaliate against Su Qianxi again? Rong Anna hung up the phone, walked to a black car, opened the door and got in. The car quickly started and drove toward the highway not far away. Rong Haiwa strode up and stopped a taxi. Follow the black car in front. Rong Xian quickly followed, and Rong Haiwa remembered that Rong Xian was still next to him. Seeing the obvious astonishment in Rong Haiwa's eyes, Rong Xian looked calm and sat in the car. The taxi followed the black car, and at Rong Haiwa's request, it always kept a distance from them. Later, the route of the black car became more and more deviated, and Rong Haiwa vigilantly asked the driver to slow down so as not to be discovered. After about 5 or 6 minutes, Rong Haiwa saw the black car again. After paying the fare and getting out of the car, Rong Haiwa found that this was a suburb. Not far from the car was an abandoned building. All kinds of waste machinery were piled up together some high. The smell of gasoline and machinery mixed together, a bit unpleasant. Looking into the distance, Rong Haiwa saw a faint light inside. Rong Xian had never encountered such a scene. Seeing Rong Haiwa's cautious look, she couldn't help but ask, What are you doing? Rong Haiwa's sharp eagle eyes flashed, and he gave the phone to Rong Xian. If Li Xiqing calls, you tell him that I am busy and may not be able to arrive. Then don't go in. It is likely to be a criminal gang. Our adopted daughter, Rong Anna, and Bo Xiao are likely to be one of them. Rong Xian was shocked, covering her mouth and looking at him. Call the police first. Don't come in if there is nothing.
I will go in and see.
Rong Xian nodded, standing outside, and said, Okay. Rong Haiwa turned and was about to go in when Rong Xian stopped him. Rong Haiwa. Yes. Rong Haiwa turned around and asked, What's wrong? Rong Xian looked at him for a long time before saying in a low voice, Be careful. Hearing this, Rong Haiwa was slightly stunned. Immediately, the heartstrings in his heart, which had calmed down for more than a month, were suddenly plucked again, shaking fiercely for a long time. Rong Xian took a small step back. Her expression could not be seen in the darkness. She whispered, Are you still not going? Rong Haiwa chuckled, nodded, and walked inside. Rong Xian's heart was pounding. She didn't seem to hate him that much anymore. Ever since that slap, ever since he almost killed her, Rong Xian's lips curled into a self-deprecating smile. In the darkness, she muttered to herself, Rong Xian, you're so cheap. Su Qianxi was firmly imprisoned, crying so hard that her throat was almost split open, but no one moved or paid any attention. On the contrary, because of her crying, those people laughed even more proudly. Chapter 5:15. No more fighting, finally no more fighting. She cried so hard that she felt weak. Looking at Li Xiqing lying in a pool of blood, she felt like she had been cut into pieces.
Why? Why did she do that to him?
It was all because of her that Li Xiqing became like this. That was Li Xiqing. In her previous lifetime, he had made a name for himself in the business world. How many people wanted to deal with him? How many people wanted to defeat him? However, at that time, Li Xiqing was so strong that he had no weaknesses. If it were not for her thinking of this, Su Qianxi could not stop her tears. I'm sorry. Li Xiqing was now in a semi-conscious state. He vaguely heard Su Qianxi's apology. He looked up and wanted to say something, but he coughed and spat out blood again. Tang Menjing slowly walked over, her every step elegant. Slowly, she squatted in front of Li Xiqing, her eyes full of pity and face full of sadness. However, she had a crazy laugh. What's so good about this woman? Is she worth it? Li Xiqing, is it painful to be beaten like this? It must be very painful, haha. As long as you beg me, I can save you now. Li Xiqing heard that and chuckled, his voice weak. Beg you? Yes, I can make you recover and live a healthy life. When you are well, you can divorce that bitch Su Qianxi and ask her to abort the child. If you like children, I can give birth to them for you. I have given birth to them before. My children will definitely be 100 times better than Su Qianxi's children. Tang Menjing grabbed his hair, lifted his head, and said with a smile, To be honest, I also like children. We can have many, okay? Li Xiqing closed his eyes and laughed even louder. Tang Menjing let go of him, arched an eyebrow, and whistled. It seems that you failed. Brother Xiqing, what's wrong with me? You used to say that I am beautiful and sensible. Whoever marries me will be very happy. But why don't you want to be a happy man? You have to push me away. Sad, really sad. Now, you are not only hurting me, but also your wife, your children, and your twins. Hee. Tang Menjing smiled and walked up to Su Qianxi. Gently touching Su Qianxi's face, she said, Your skin is so good.
21, right?
Her face is really full of collagen, young and beautiful. Don't touch her, Li Xiqing said with difficulty. He coughed up another mouthful of blood and blacked out. Tang Menjing immediately withdrew her hand, looking scared. I won't touch her. I don't dare. Ha ha ha. With that, he strode to the back and shouted, Hey, time to work. As soon as Tang Menjing said that, two men walked out of the room with two big bottles in their hands. Looking at Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi, they sneered and opened the lids. Chapter 5:16. The strong smell of gasoline spread throughout the warehouse. Several men poured 4 barrels of gasoline around the abandoned warehouse. When Rong Anna and Bo Xiao went in, They saw Li Xiqing lying in a pool of blood, embarrassed and bloody. Li Xiqing's arrogance was nowhere to be seen. Seeing this, Rong Anna frowned and looked at Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi's emotions had collapsed, and there was only Li Xiqing in her eyes. Tang Menjing took out a lighter and played with it on her fingers, looking at the expression on Li Xiqing's face expectantly. Sure enough, there was finally a trace of emotion on Li Xiqing's face. He looked up at her and reached out to her. Tang Menjing raised her eyebrows with satisfaction, chuckled, and said, "You want to talk to me? What do you want to say? Go ahead." Stepping on high heels, she went forward and squatted down to listen. "Let her go." Li Xiqing's voice was weak but clear, with a bit of pleading. "She and the child are innocent. If you have any hatred, take it out on me. Don't touch her." Seeing Li Xiqing like this, Tang Zhenghao was very proud. He laughed out loud and said, "Li Xiqing, you deserve this. It's a pity that I did not bring Li Xiao here. Otherwise, it would be wonderful. I will let you die with your father." "Wow, do you think Li Sun will cry?" "Ha ha. However, if I can kill you, it will be enough for the Li family. Next it will be Li Xiao, Li Jinan, Li Beixing, Li Sun, and that bitch Qin Shuhua." Speaking of Qin Shuhua, the anger in Tang Zhenghao's heart overflowed. He strode to Li Xiqing's side and kicked him hard. Li Xiqing groaned. Tang Zhenghao kicked him several times in a row, making Li Xiqing convulse in pain. At the same time, Rong Haiyue carefully walked forward. Although he was a little far away, he soon heard the hysterical shouting inside. "No, I beg you, don't hit me. If you keep hitting me, I will die. I will really die." Rong Haiyue was shocked. That was Su Qianxi's voice. Hearing Su Qianxi's cry, Tang Zhenghao felt comfortable. He pulled Li Xiqing's hair up and made him look at Su Qianxi, smiling wickedly. "Comfortable? Back then, when your mother killed my son, it must have been this comfortable." Then, Tang Zhenghao grabbed Li Xiqing's head and slammed it against the ground, shouting, "Why? CK you bitch. Why did my son fall down the mountain with you? You didn't die, but my son died? Why? Why?" Li Xiqing's head hit the ground, making a loud noise. Su Qianxi felt that her heart was also bleeding. Watching him being tortured was more painful than torturing herself. She closed her eyes, and tears fell silently. Despair, despair, no one came to save them. No one could it be that they could only wait for death? However, he suddenly heard Tang Zhenghao scream. The voice came very suddenly and was completely out of place in the overwhelming situation just now. Then, Tang Menjing exclaimed, "Dad." At the same time, Rong Anna also said, "Dad?" Chapter 517. Just Rong Haiyue? How could he suddenly appear? Su Qianxi felt like she was dreaming. Looking at him, she quickly screamed, "Mr. Rong, go. Dangerous, too dangerous." This time, it was not like last time when Mrs. Tang had a few gangsters. This time it was a drug gang and they had more than one gun. Rong Haiyue heard Su Qianxi's cry and turned his head, but it was because of this that he was attacked by Tang Zhenghao. Tang Zhenghao was middle-aged and fat. When he was young, he was also in the army, and his strength was definitely not small. At this moment, Rong Haiyue was pressed to the ground, and his fat hand grabbed his neck. He picked up the steel pipe next to him and was about to swing it at Rong Haiyue. "Don't touch my father," Rong Anna shouted, but Tang Zhenghao did not stop. He directly swung his thick arm straight at Rong Haiyue's head. Rong Haiyue was a major general after all. At this moment, seeing this, he raised his knee and wanted to push him away. However, Tang Zhenghao's weight was actually heavier than he thought. His neck was grabbed, and Rong Haiyue's face turned red. He bent his elbow and hit Tang Zhenghao's head. Tang Zhenghao was pushed up, and his movement was slightly off. With a strong push, Tang Zhenghao lifted the steel pipe in his hand again, ready to hit Rong Haiyue's head. Swoosh! The originally loud gunshot, under the silencer, became a subtle sound of breaking wind. Rong Haiwei clearly heard the sound of flesh being pierced. He was shocked and looked up, only to see Tang Zhenghao's eyes wide open and his body stiff. Then, Tang Zhenghao's body fell straight forward, steadily pressing on Rong Haiyue's body. The steel pipe that was originally held in his hand also fell to the ground in an instant, making a clattering sound. Blood flowed down Tang Zhenghao's neck to Rong Haiyue's body, with a warm and moist feeling, clearly into his clothes. Rong Haiyue was shocked. After pushing Tang Zhenghao away, he immediately looked in the direction of Rong Anna. Rong Anna did not move, but the man standing next to her, holding a pistol, his eyes cold and indifferent. He did not panic at all because he had killed someone. Obviously, he was not a newbie.
Ah!
Tang Menjing screamed, "Dad." With this scream, Rong Haiyue seemed to wake up from a dream and pushed the body away. Tang Zhenghao's body lay on the ground, his eyes wide open, motionless. Tang Menjing hurried to Tang Zhenghao in her high heels, looking incredulous. Standing far away, Su Qianxi was tied up, but seeing this scene, she was paralyzed. Kill murder? The gun was fired by Bo Xiao. He had killed Tang Zhenghao, Rong Anna also exclaimed and shouted in disbelief. "You are crazy." "That's Tang Zhenghao. The goods are still with him. He's too annoying and naggy. He beat Li Xiqing like this when we were not here."
Who's going to help us now?
What an idiot. The goods are still with him? Rong Haiyue immediately caught the point. He got up and was furious. "Anna." Rong Anna was shocked, and her first reaction was to respond. "Dad, what are you doing? Are you really selling drugs? Did you really go with Bo Xiao to do this?" For a moment, Rong Anna did not know how to explain. Suddenly, there was a subtle sound outside. It was the sound of a gun being loaded. Hearing this subtle sound, both Bo Xiao and Rong Anna's expressions changed.
Who was outside? Dash.
Chapter 5:18. Bo Xiao made up his mind and gestured to Rong Anna, and the people behind him immediately understood. One person went forward to check and suddenly stopped, turning around and shouting, "Police! So many police! Run!" Both Bo Xiao and Rong Anna were shocked. For the first time, several people inside all rushed toward the back door. "Don't even think about leaving," Tang Menjing suddenly yelled, picked up the phone in her hand, lit it, and threw it at the place where the gasoline had been poured.
Boom.
The fire suddenly sprang up, without warning, unprepared. Scorching waves of air rushed over in an instant, bringing with them the smell of burning ruins and the smell of gasoline. Every place was covered in a layer of orange-red flames. The man finally let go of her. She was caught off guard and collapsed. The man looked at Tang Menjing angrily and shouted, "Crazy! You are crazy! We can't get out like this!" "Ha ha ha!" Tang Menjing laughed almost crazily, holding Tang Zhenghao's body, with tears and cruel laughter. "Why do you want to go out? Don't even think about going out. Aren't you afraid of the police? With such a big fire, the police dare not come in. All of you, die together." Motherf **, crazy. The man went up and directly hit Tang Menjing with a stick, hard on her body. Tang Menjing screamed. The man was still angry and kicked her in the back hard. "Go, don't hit her. Take her with you. She knows where the goods are." Bo Xiao shouted, but he took Rong Anna and rushed toward the back door. Seeing this, the man cursed, but immediately no longer hesitated. He directly pulled Tang Menjing up and ran toward the back door. "Rong Anna, stop!" Rong Haiyue roared. "Bo Xiao, where are you taking my daughter?" Rong Anna slightly paused, turned around, and saw Rong Haiyue's expression. Bo Xiao pulled her and roared, "Do you really think he is your father? His daughter is there. Who do you think you are? Come with me." Rong Haiyue heard this, and his heart sank. How did they know? He clearly did not tell them about this, and he did not reveal anything when he returned home. When did Rong Anna know? When Rong Anna heard Bo Xiao's words, she was moved. She looked at Rong Haiyue and whispered quickly, "I'm sorry, Dad." "Anna." Rong Haiyue's voice was flustered and scared. Anna. But Rong Anna no longer stayed and rushed straight to the back. Mr. Rong, help. Su Qianxi cried, her eyes full of begging. Her voice was hoarse and choked. Please save us, who. For a moment, the fire grew fiercer and fiercer, and crackling sounds of explosions could be heard everywhere. This was an abandoned electrical appliance factory. Abandoned machinery and industrial wreckage were the most dangerous. Surrounded by the fire, only the half-dead Li Xiqing, Su Qianxi, and Rong Haiyue were left. Rong Haiyue was disappointed with Rong Anna, but he quickly reacted. He walked towards Su Qianxi and untied her. Just at this moment, the sound of panicked footsteps came from outside. 5 or 6 people filed in. Seeing the scene, someone quickly gave orders. One of you stay behind, the rest go after the criminals. Chapter 519. However, she did not dare to touch him, did not dare. There was no place on Li Xiqing's body that was not stained with blood. Just like that, he lay quietly on the ground. Even his breathing was very weak. What to do? What to do? Su Qianxi burst into tears. Take him to the hospital. Take him to the hospital. Hurry up. Rong Haiyue wanted to, but there was nothing he could do. Don't move. The policeman warned, squatted down to check, and announced, there are many fractures on the body. Don't move. If the bones pierce the internal organs, it will not be fun. The fire was getting bigger and bigger, and there was the sound of explosions from time to time. The unpleasant smell of burning machinery kept coming. It's dangerous. Take her away first. Li Xiqing's voice was very weak. Take her out first, please. No, Su Qianxi cried. If we go together. No, I don't want you to die. The child can't live without a father. Please, save him. Take him with you, I beg you. Su Qianxi said, and even wanted to kneel and kowtow to them. Rong Haiyue quickly held her and forced her to calm down with a pair of sharp eagle eyes. He said word by word, listen, the situation is a bit dangerous now. The fire is too big. If we don't go out now, we won't be able to. Now, I will take you out first. Later, I will carry Li Xiqing out with this policeman, and I promise I will give you a Li Xiqing alive, okay? Really? Su Qianxi wiped her tears and looked at Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing nodded at her. Be good and protect the child first. I will go out later. But, no buts. Rong Haiyue almost roared. If you want him to live, you must get out now. Get out. Only when you get out safely can we have nothing to worry about. Su Qianxi stopped crying and nodded dumbly. However, her eyes still couldn't help looking in the direction of Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing also looked up at her. His usually cold, sharp, and dark eyes were now reflecting the fire. The stars at the bottom of his eyes seemed to have gathered thousands of stars, which was very beautiful. Su Qianxi.
His voice was weak.
Hearing this, Su Qianxi almost broke down and burst into tears, but she did not dare to. Gritting her teeth, she looked at him. He looked at her, his eyes full of tenderness. He said, I love you forever. His heart felt as if something was running away quickly, and he was losing it quickly. So empty, so empty. The fire was very big, and there was a large area of fallen beams and ruins in the surroundings. There was almost no way out. Tang Zhenghao was very good at choosing a place. The place where they were just now was the central area of the abandoned factory. They were dozens of meters away from the place where there was no fire. Thick black smoke rushed up, and Su Qianxi almost fainted. She forcefully covered her mouth and nose, but the black smoke was still pervasive, causing her vision to turn black. Rong Haiyue gritted his teeth and whispered, Hold your breath. Rong Xian stood at the door for a long time, and suddenly there was a car coming from behind. Police car. Several policemen came to her side, quietly asked her a few words, and then left one to look at her. Then they all quietly approached the abandoned factory. Chapter 520. Rong Xian's mind was buzzing, looking at the place shrouded in fire.
He was still inside. They were still inside.
Her daughter, her husband. Rong Xian's breathing became more and more rapid, and she ran inside. The policewoman who stayed to watch her pulled her and said, "Don't go in. Our people went in, and the people inside will be fine." Yes, with the police it would be fine. Rong Xian waited for a long time. After what seemed like a few centuries, someone finally walked out from inside. A tall figure, holding a pregnant woman. The pregnant woman's belly was very eye-catching. It seemed that she had fainted. Rong Xian did not care who the pregnant woman was. When she saw the tall figure, she knew it was him. He came out. Rong Xian breathed a sigh of relief and ran forward. Rong Haiyue was exhausted. Seeing Rong Xian, he put her in her arms and said, "Call an ambulance." She fainted. "Child, don't let anything happen to the child." Then he was about to get up and go inside again. Rong Xian was shocked and asked, "Where are you going?" "Li Xiqing is still inside. I must save him." Rong Haiyue finished and had already taken a step. Such a big fire. Rong Xian shouted, and there was a bit of fear in her voice. "It's too dangerous." Rong Haiyue stopped and turned around to look at her. She was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that he would die? Thinking of this, Rong Haiyue suddenly smiled, but in a moment, he turned and ran inside. While running, he said happily, "I will come out alive to see you." When Rong Xian heard this, there was an unknown place in the bottom of her heart, quietly scratched, and an unknown fire slowly rose, burned. The policewoman also ran in, and the two figures, one after the other, disappeared in the fire. Rong Xian immediately called an ambulance, but when she was asked for the address, she was speechless for a while. How did she know where it was? She was not familiar with Kingstown at all. Eastern Suburbs, number 8, abandoned factory. A faint voice sounded in her arms, and she said with half-opened eyes. Rong Xian immediately repeated the address, and then called the fire department. In the end, he helped her up and gently patted her face. "Are you okay? Drink some water first." Opening the bottle of mineral water she had drunk, Rong Xian fed it to her mouth. Su Qianxi took 2 sips, but her tears soon fell again. Rong Haiyue went to save him. "Don't worry, he will be fine," Rong Xian said. Although she said so, Rong Xian herself was not sure. The fire was so big that even the sky was red. The black ruins flew into the sky and then disappeared without a trace. A Porsche sports car drove over, and Su Qianxi and Rong Xian looked back at the same time. When Li Jinan saw Rong Xian, he was stunned. "Sister-in-law." Su Qianxi saw Li Jinan's face, which was quite similar to Li Xiqing's. As if grasping a life-saving straw, she reached out to him and called, "Uncle." Li Jinan immediately came over and supported her. "How is it? Where's my brother?" Chapter 5:21. Yes. Li Jinan's tone was firm. "Of course he can. He is Li Xiqing. If he does not come out, the world will be in chaos. He will not dare not to come out." Yes, he was Li Xiqing, and he would not die. He did not dare to die. He had a great responsibility. He was carrying the entire Li group on his shoulders, as well as her and the children, their home. Su Qianxi's heart, because of this sentence of Li Jinan, slightly calmed down. Yes, how could he die? How could he dare to die? No way, I'll go inside. I'll go inside to find him.
Boom.
Li Jinan's words, only 3 words, were stopped by a strong explosion and swallowed back into his mouth. Fire from all the exits of the Low factory burst out, carrying a scorching heat wave, like a burst balloon. In a moment, it turned into a raging fire, straight to the sky. Dyed the clouds red, dyed the sky red, high flames, jumping in the sky, forming a strange big smile, revealing hideous fangs, as if it was proud, as if it was showing off. "Look, I swallowed the man you love most." The debris of the wall, the industrial wreckage, suddenly splashed out, hitting their bodies and faces. It was not heavy, not big, not painful. but it pierced the hearts of the three of them in an instant. Li Jin and stared, looking at that place, unable to believe it.
Ah!
Su Qianxi screamed sharply, desperately climbing up in Rong Xian's arms, climbing in that direction. Li Xiqing, Li Xiqing. Li Jin and quickly grabbed her and pulled her back. Rong Xian was also stunned. Hearing Su Qianxi scream, she did not know when her throat had been choked and painful. It was more painful than when Rong Haiyue pinched her. "Uncle, let me go, let me go." Su Qianxi's eyes had long been red and swollen. At this moment, looking at the place covered by the fire, in her heart, there was an unspeakable despair, like a cold tide, engulfing her and wrapping her. Unable to struggle free, unable to resist Li Xiqing, Su Qianxi struggled and looked in that direction. Her crying voice had long been broken. Her throat had long been split open, and it was so dry that smoke was coming out. The pain went straight to her heart, burning, not giving her any room to breathe. So painful, so painful. He must be in more pain. Li Xiqing, Mr. Li, sister-in-law. Li Jinan's voice was hoarse, but he was calmer than usual. He pulled her along and assured her he'll be fine. He'll be fine. Su Qianxi felt like her heart had been slapped. It hurt so much. What should she do? She seemed like she couldn't take it anymore. He felt a weight on his hand. Looking down, she had already passed out with her eyes closed. Rong Haiyue. Rong Xian looked at the sea of fire and rushed forward like crazy. The 8-centimeter pointed heels made Rong Xian fall down after running for 2 steps. Rong Haiyue, Rong Haiyue. Rong Xian's eyes were blurred by tears. She took off her high heels and ran around the back of the warehouse barefoot. It was very hot. The temperature on the ground was so high that Rong Xian could hardly stand. The raging fire had wrapped the entire building tightly. There was no place to go in, and there was no place to go out. No, that won't happen. There must be a way, there must be a place to go out. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.